Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome to Let's Start Story on What If Naruto Had Muti Harem with Suli and Anko. So do 4 blue hearts comment, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video and please share with your friends and watch till end. Also check out Patreon for I have upload Naruto x Kushina uncensored spicy version, link in description. Amika's Minato collapsed to the ground after his final battle cry. The soon-to-be former Yondaime Hokage could only watch in self-loathing as the Kyuubi no Yuko was sealed into his newborn son by the Shinigami. His son, Naruto, made no sound as this was happening. He merely scrunched his eyes tightly in displeasure as a being powerful enough to level entire mountains was sealed inside him. The TTLE with the giant kitsune had been nothing short of war. Ninja and civilian alike had suffered major casualties. The dead and dying bodies of fallen shinobi and kunoichi surrounded Minato. He could smell the burning flesh and taste the metallic flavor of blood in the air. Minato was shocked to still be alive after the Shinigami vanished, its job finished. He could feel his body shutting down, he knew death was only minutes away. With the small amount of time he had been granted, he did the one thing he wanted to do more than any other. Minato pulled his infant son into his arms. The baby GG led and opened his crystal-clear cerulean blue eyes as he was picked up. The small child had short, spiky tufts of blonde hair along with 3 whisker marks that scarred both of his cheeks. Aside from the 3 black marks on each cheek, the infant appeared to be a miniature clone of the man currently holding him. Minato couldn't help but smile softly at his son's giggle. It had been the first ounce the child had made since being taken from his now-dead mother. Minato smiled bitterly and didn't even attempt to halt the guilt and anguish that encompassed his heart as he remembered his wife's recent death. Naruto's mother had died due to complications from the birthing process. He hadn't expected that to happen and now his son would grow up without parents. Naruto, my beautiful baby boy. In less than an hour of life you have already sacrificed so much. I don't have much time left and you won't even remember this, but I have to do something good for you, since I've already done so many wrongs to you. He said as he let out a mirthless laugh, one filled with remorse. Your mother, Kushina, she was beautiful and amazing, and she loved you so very much. It's actually the reason you're named Naruto. She didn't let me do anything when it came to you. She chose which books we would go by. She picked out the furniture and clothing you would have, she painted and decorated your room. She even chose your godparents. Kami only knows why she would choose a pervert like Jiraiya. But she did it all. In the end the only thing left was your name. She felt a little guilty and left that up to me. She was so mad when I told her you would be called Naruto. He spoke with a loving smile as his mind briefly reminisced. I spent 2 weeks sleeping on the sitting room futon because of that. He could feel his body getting weaker, it was getting harder for him to even speak. When you realize your burdened son, you will hate me. You will curse my name and your very blood. I can only hope that this gives you some measure of relief and satisfaction. I know your life will be tough, filled with hardship and strife. I just hope you remember that your mother and I love you and we always will. Minato said as he cradled his son closer to his chest. His breathing was coming in wheezes. Kami-sama, Minato silently called, you have been good to me. You have granted me my every dream from when I was young. Please do me this one last act of goodwill. Please give my son a life where he can find love and happiness. It was at that moment that a figure walked with determined, but calm footsteps from the shadows. Minato assumed the figure was male from the body shape, but he couldn't be sure since the figure's body was covered in a high-collar black cloak that was adorned with red clouds. The person's face was obstructed with an orange whirlpool mask, the swirls centered on a single eye opening. Only the figure's long, spiky black hair could be seen clearly. Surprising, the unknown man's voice whispered. I had not expected you to survive the sealing. Minato watched the man, who seemed completely unaffected by the death and destruction surrounding him, remove his mask and toss it aside. The face that was revealed caused Minato recoil in shock and fear. The man was handsome, if slightly wrinkled, and appeared middle-aged. His coal-black eyes coolly gazed at Minato without emotion. Uchiha Madara, Minato whispered out in disbelief. This was a man that was supposed to have died over 70 years ago and it was a being that was the single greatest threat to Konoha. Madara heard the whispered words, but he did not react, nor did he care. His eyes focused on the sole reason he had come to this place. He reached down and gently pried the infant away from Minato's weak hold. He stood and cradled the child in his arms. "Hello, little Naruto," Madara softly murmured. "I am your grandfather, Uchiha Madara. I have already seen your life as it would have been here, alone. Power to rival the gods, fighting an unwinnable battle for undeserving and ungrateful people. I shall take you away from this place and that future." Pedigree of Konoha's yellow flash. He spared a glance at the dying Yondaime. "Power of the Kyuubi no Yuko," he said as he briefly touched the seal that was tattooed onto the infant's stomach. "And the bloodline of the Uchiha," Madara intoned as he touched the child's forehead, channeling a small amount of chakra through his fingertips. He watched with satisfaction as Naruto's eyes bled to the piercing Sharingan red, a single Itomo spinning in the iris of each eye. After removing his fingers, the child's eyes returned to their sparkling shade of blue. Madara gave the dying man a disinterested look after the man gasped. "Why?" Minato choked out. Madara did not need the man to elaborate, he knew what the man had meant. For a moment he nearly turned and walked away, not caring to ease the man's tortured thoughts, but in the end he figured he should repay the dying man for gifting him Naruto. "I sent the Kyuubi to attack because I wanted to damage Konoha. Regrettably, Kushina-chan's death was unavoidable. She was destined to die giving birth to Naruto. So I made the best of the situation. I knew you would have only used your own child as the vessel for the beast. Konoha will never recover from the damage caused by the Kyuubi. The loss of their powerful Yondaime Hokage, and, even more importantly, the loss of Naruto. Konoha will survive, as it always has, but it will never be the great power it once was." Dara spared a fleeting glance at the village he helped create before returning to the dying blonde. "This world is tainted. Konoha is the cause of most of that taint. The village has fallen far from the ideals of the Senju. Naruto and I will leave this world. He would never know true happiness when surrounded by the hatred your village would direct at him. We will find a world that will accept him, for who and what he is. You can rest well in the afterlife knowing your son will be loved. Goodbye, Namikaze Minato." With Naruto safely tucked into his arm, Madara turned and began walking away from the near-dead man. He was only able to get a few hundred yards away before he was halted. Wait up." He turned swiftly, raising his free hand to defend his grandson if needed. He was mildly surprised because everyone should have been trapped inside his multi-layered genjutsu that he had woven around the Yondaime. Madara wanted to take Naruto without need for an altercation. The only way for someone to be freed of his genjutsu is if he had wanted them to be, or someone of my direct blood. Are you the cause of this, little Naruto? Madara was even more surprised, not that his face showed it, at just who had interrupted him. A single girl who appeared to be 11 years of age. She had violet-colored hair pulled into a spiky ponytail in the back, pupil-less light brown eyes, and tanned skin. Her mouth was twisted into a slight scowl. Madara found it a little odd that the girl was holding a Konoha Hitai 8 with a missing nin slash running through it. The girl should have been too young to even be a kunoichi. Yes, Madara quietly questioned with a raised brow as the girl stopped a few feet away from him, panting slightly. Take me with you. The girl's expression turned sour. Madara imagined she didn't often ask for assistance. Look, I hate this place. She motioned toward Konoha, and that place hates me. They'll be too busy dealing with the cleanup. This is my best chance to get out. Just let me travel with you. Madara calmly stared at the girl, momentarily wondering if she even knew who he was. If her demanding speech were anything to go by, then she hadn't a single clue. No, he stated with complete indifference. He had more important things to deal with than some preteen girl. As he turned to leave, he was stopped by the girl's hand on his forearm. The girl's control slipped. Please. She pleaded as her eyes moistened with unshed tears. Why, you don't understand. I was Orochimaru's student. They hate me. I need to get away from them. Madara could feel the underlying sorrow and helplessness in the girl's voice. It made no difference for him. I do not make it a habit to repeat myself. Ignoring the sob that escaped from the girl's mouth, Madara too RNED to leave but was stopped once again. He glanced at the infant that had caught his attention by pulling on his cloak. Is this why she was allowed past my genjutsu, little Naruto? Do you wish for her to join us? As though the boy heard his nonverbal question, Naruto giggled and pointed toward the depressed girl. This is unexpected and she will likely be an irritant, but if you wish for her to come, little Naruto, then she must make herself useful. Your name. His voice brought the girl out of her self-pity. She stared at him with hopeful eyes. He nodded sharply once before turning and to walk on. Confident that she would understand the nonverbal order. She didn't disappoint him when she dropped into step slightly behind him. Mitarashi Anko, she stated while eyeing the infant Madara was holding curiously. Madara did not visually acknowledge her as he continued his relaxed but measured pace. Anko huffed, annoyed with the silence. So, who's the brat? My grandson, Madara. Did not particularly like giving information out, but since she would be traveling with them, she would need to at least know the basics. Oh, she mumbled as she compared the two males, looking for shared physical traits. I don't see it. Quote. Madara continued on, mentally calculating how far he would need to be to safely use his technique without catching the attention of anyone. He knew Konoha wou. LD be too busy mourning the dead and celebrating the death of the Kyuubi to bother seeking out a relatively small chakra spike a few miles away from the village. Anko was becoming more irritated by the second. Can I at least know your name? And the brats too. He glanced toward the sleeping child, silently asking if the girl was needed. Naruto simply snuggled deeper into his hold. Uchiha Madara. A smirk played at the edge of his mouth. He was pleased that she nearly stumbled to the ground after learning who he was. And he is my grandson, Namikaze Naruto. Namikaze, Anko's voice was who? Shed as she considered everything that she just learned. So, I guess he's the son of Yondaime-sama, who did something with the Kyuubi to the kid. What happened back there anyways? Madara ignored her. He figured he would only need to walk another half-mile before it would be safe to leave the elemental countries permanently. Anko nearly growled out, well, at least tell me where we're going. We're leaving the elemental countries. Madara replied calmly. What in the hell does that mean? This time she was growling, frustrated with how difficult it was to get a direct answer. Madara sighed. ND privately wondered if Naruto would be bothered if he killed the girl. Eventually he decided to just give her enough information to satisfy her curiosity. Hopefully he wouldn't have to listen to her voice after that. Naruto is Namikaze Minato's son, your former Hokage. His mother was a kunoichi from a small village I had started. Her name was Kushina and she was my daughter. The Uchiha clan eyed the walls of Konoha descended from my brother's line. Naruto is my only true kin alive. Back there was the Yondaime sealing the Kyuubi no Yuko inside Naruto, making him a Jinchuriki. It is unknown where we are going. The technique I will be using does not allow for me to choose, Madara said, his voice unemotional except when talking about his former daughter and current grandson. Anko Neural. Why stumbled to the ground for the second time, silently absorbing the influx of information. What do you know about where we will be going? Anko questioned. Madara silently sighed, apparently she was like a stray cat. Feed them once and they keep coming back for more. The technique I will be using is something I have never used before. By design it will send us to an alternate world, which world will be left to fate and chance. Madara uttered with a small grimace. He did not like to leave things up to chance, but the future his grandson would live in the shinobi world would be worse than the unknown. For Naruto, he would take the risk. Oh, she trailed off, unsure how to respond to that knowledge. What is my reason, Anko stammered. Why did you allow me to come with you and what is expected of me? She finally forced out. Madara briefly considered her questions before coming to a satisfactory answer. It was not me that permitted you to come, you have Naruto to thank for that, he responded. And as for what is expected of you, you're Naruto's. Naruto's what? She voiced, seemingly without thought. His chattel, Madara coolly said. You are whatever he requires of you at any given point in his life. You will be Naruto's nanny, playmate and tutor when he is young, his lover and maid when he matures. You simply belong to him. He continued his measured steps, getting closer to when the time would be right to leave this world. For Anko, she was lost in thought. If she had been anyone else, she would have been angered, even murderous at the idea of belonging to another person. However, She wasn't just anyone, she was Mitarashi Anko, former apprentice to Orochimaru. Her legs automatically continued following Madara as she pondered how her life had taken her to this point. Her mother had been a Konoha Chunin, someone she never met in person. Their only contact had been on slips of papers when money had been deposited into an orphan account. Her father played no part in her life. Him leaving his pregnant lover. As many single kunoichi are forced to do, Anko had been taken to the orphanage as soon as she had been born. When she turned 4, the money from her mother's mission pay had stopped coming in. Her mother had been killed in action away from the village. There would be no body to view or even a burial to say goodbye to. Her mother had died, the same way she lived to Anko, an abstract thought. Hurt, angered and bitter at the unfairness of her life, Anko threw herself into her training. She wanted to make something of herself, make her name mean something to people. She still remembered the day when Orochimaru of the Sannin approached her, telling her that he was impressed with her potential and then requested that she become his pupil. That had been the happiest day of her life for the longest time. For the unwanted daughter and unloved orphan to be requested by such a prestigious and powerful person, she didn't hesitate to accept. Those years seemed like another time to her. She slept at the training grounds, waking up at dawn to begin training and not stopping until it was well into the night. She fought tooth and nail for every scrap of respect and acknowledgement from her master, Orochimaru. He had been a ruthless shinobi and that carried over to training. He was brutal. She didn't care though, she seen him as a father figure and she wanted his love. The harder he pushed her, the harder she tried to impress him. Eventually the chance for her to earn a spot in his heart came. He had developed a special seal that would bond two beings together. Or at least that's how he worded it. Only now did she understand that the seal was more comparable to a leash and collar. After he branded her neck with his seal, he abandoned her like trash. The same way her father had abandoned her mother, just as her mother had later abandoned her to the orphanage. At 10 years of age, her heart had been scarred and her soul tainted. She was allowed to return to Konoha. But it wasn't the same. The village had been hurting and furious that Orochimaru, one of their heroes, had betrayed them. They instinctively sought out a vent for those emotions. The former apprentice of the traitor made for the only logical choice to them. It was humorlessly ironic that most nights Anko would curl into a ball in the corner of her room and thank the kamis for Orochimaru's teachings. It was only her kunoichi skills that saved her from the rape attempts. There was at least one attempt per week and she had been lucky enough to keep what little innocence she still had intact. But she knew that one day someone she couldn't beat would come for her. But even that isn't what had her contemplating suicide often. No, it was the future that terrified Anko. Inside every ninja village there existed false infiltration missions. At least that was what kunoichi verbally called them. Every female ninja knew that they were really missions hired out by anyone with the money to get a chance to sleep with whichever kunoichi had caught that person's eye. Thankfully Konoha required the kunoichi to be 15 years old before being available to being requested. Anko knew that there were many men looking to get their revenge on Orochimaru though her. And when the time came, her body would be brutally used over and over again by over 100 different males. That is why Anko wasn't immediately rejecting Madara's offer. She would eventually be expected to sleep with someone if she followed the ancient Uchiha, but it would only be one man. And even that person would be someone she had a hand in helping raise. When compared to her former future, this was a dream come true. She wished her owner would grow to be someone that could care for and possibly love her. But she didn't hold on to that hope for long. If her life had taught her anything, it was that good things didn't happen to Mitarashi Anko. Given that the alternative was so horrible for her. When Madara stopped walking she was resigned to her new position in life. Hold Naruto, Madara ordered as he held the boy out to her. Be sure you keep his eyes covered. Anko gently held the boy that owned her in her arms, while giving Madara a strange look. What, afraid he'll copy your technique, Super Uchiha? She snickered. Her laughs froze in her throat as a glare that chilled her to the bone was her immediate answer. Yes, his voice was cold and held a dangerous edge. We will not be returning to this world, ever. I will not risk Naruto remembering the seals for the technique. No matter how unlikely that possibility. It is for that reason that you will turn your back to me as well. Anko didn't see why he was so serious about this, but considering how close she had come to pushing the man too far, she figured it would be best to shut her mouth. While Anko was staring into the distance, lost in thought as she kept one of her hands over the boy's closed eyes, Madara was preparing to use his technique. He had never used it before, but he knew it would work. None of the techniques he had developed throughout his life had failed him, and neither would this one. Mad. Eris silently activated his Mangekyo Sharingan. His technique would require its special abilities. He moved to stand next to Anko, after assuring himself that neither Anko nor Naruto would see anything. He began going through all 237 hand seals. Once complete, all three of them disappeared from the elemental countries, never to be seen in that world again. Outskirts of Tokyo, Japan. October 10, 1979. Madara had anticipated a rough landing and his hands immediately removed his grandson from Anko's hold. He watched dispassionately as the girl collapsed to the ground. She had been unprepared for the travel. He looked over Naruto, running a general diagnostic medical technique to check his overall health. The readings were good, so he returned his gaze to the 11-year-old girl current L.Y. throwing up whatever she had eaten recently. He gave her a short glance, not truly concerned with her health. They had been lucky to land in the forested section of this unknown place, Madara thought. As he extended his senses attempting to locate anyone nearby, he relaxed slightly when he only found various small animals in the immediate area. Unsure of this world's attire, Madara decided it would be safer for them to be clothed in nondescript clothing. Once he was sure that the young girl had finished vomiting from the rough trip, Madara ordered her to hold Naruto. When his grandson was comfortably in her arms, he rolled up the left sleeve of his black cloak to reveal numerous kanji tattoo-like seals. He located the one for clothing and unsealed the large scroll from his arm. Madara unrolled the scroll. Countless kanji were written on the large scroll. He quickly unsealed all of what he needed before sealing the entire scroll back onto his arm. He handed some clothing small enough for a baby and a change of clothing that should fit her to the girl. He was satisfied that she at least followed that nonverbal command without hesitation. Madara doubted that she would always be this compliant. Apparently she was shocked by the level of power he demonstrated just moments ago in taking them to an alternate world. Madara himself calmly changed into his own new clothing before he sealed all of their previous clothing away into a temporary scroll that he would deal with later. He gave short once-over at the girl and his grandson, satisfied that their new civilian garb would be more likely to blend in with the unknown people. Hold Naruto and follow me, he directed to Anko. He turned and began walking in the direction of what he sensed was the nearest human. The walk to the person's location did not take too long. While on the way, Madara went over his options of what to do once he reached this person or persons. He decided that if they were susceptible to his genjutsu, he would psychologically interrogate them and then lock them into a deep sleep and only awaken them if there were needed. If the person wasn't vulnerable to his genjutsu, then he would interrogate them for information on this world through torture and kill them afterward. He could only sense one person inside the small, well-kept home. It was large compared to the homes of the elemental countries. He could see what he thought was a metal carriage with 4 rubber wheels outside the house. Madara would learn more about the world later, for now he needed to see the person inside the small building. He ordered Anko to remain outside with Naruto, in case it was dangerous inside. Stepping beyond the door he had just opened, he spared a cursory glance around the room. It was simple but elegantly furnished. Madara wondered how well off the man was in this world. The sound of padded footsteps pulled his attention to one of the hallways. He watched a middle-aged man point a metal-barreled object in his direction. Madara's body moved without need for direction. Decades of experience had trained him to read body language and he reacted instinctively to perceived threats. The man was relinquished of the assumed weapon and restrained with wire that Madara had sealed onto his body. Madara was thankful that the man was vulnerable to genjutsu. It made the interrogation much cleaner and easier. Within 5 minutes he had the man broken. He learned that the man's name was Tanaka Naoto and that they were inside the city of Tokyo. The country of Japan that he was in spoke Japanese, a language he found nearly identical to what was used in the elemental countries. The man was in his mid-50s, a retired and reclusive wealthy businessman that lived alone in the forest because the man wanted to be away from the city. Naoto had one daughter that was married and had children of her own. They visited once or twice each year. They were scheduled to visit in a few months. Satisfied that Naruto would be safe in Naoto's home for now, he rendered the man unconscious with a long-duration genjutsu. He then went to retrieve Naruto. He ordered Anko to find the child a bed inside and allow Naruto to spend the rest of the day resting. Madara informed her that he would be leaving to investigate the main population of Tokyo, as well as collect all the supplies Naruto would need at his young age. Madara quickly moved the unconscious Naoto to a closet before warning Anko that she would beg for death if she allowed anything to happen to Naruto. He then started making his way toward the main part of the city. Tanaka Naoto's home. December 21, 1979. Madara's trained hearing gave all the warning he needed to prepare for Naoto's daughter and her family. He had been anticipating this for the past few weeks. In that time he and Naruto had settled in nicely. The weather had turned cold, snow blanketed the area, and Madara had been forced to cut a few trees into firewood for the furnace. Food and water were easy to get. 2 trips into the city to shop at the grocery stores and markets were enough to comfortably get by. Genjutsu was used often to simply convince the merchants that they had been paid. Anko-san, we have visitors, Madara said without worry. When they get here, I will ascertain how long they will be staying and place them in a genjutsu that will cause them to belly. If they had an average stay where nothing notable happened, I will send them away once their stay is scheduled to be finished. Outskirts of Tokyo, Japan. January 23, 1985. Control your breathing, Madara whispered. Barely loud enough for the 5-year-old boy standing in front of him to hear. Time your release with the end of your exhale. The blond boy made no movement or sound to acknowledge that he had heard the man. Be sure to take the wind into account, Madara continued to instruct quietly. Aim for its midsection, just behind its forelegs. The boy twisted his body slightly. Take aim, little Naruto. Madara ordered in a hushed voice. And fire. The boy released the arrow and watched it strike its target. The boy whooped in joy at his direct hit. Good job, Madara said with a pleased smile. Now we follow the trail of blood. The deer will eventually collapse and you will finish the kill. Anko's room. June 13, 1986. Anko slammed the book shut with a groan. She deserved a break and she was going to get one. She stood from the desk chair and staggered her way onto her bed to get some much-needed sleep. She sighed as she relaxed into the mattress, her eyes drifting closed. How's the studying going, Anko-chan? She heard Naruto call from the doorway. She moaned in displeasure at having her rest interrupted so suddenly. Madara had told her that he expected her to be learned. That an uneducated and ignorant chattel was useless to Naruto. For the last few years, she had been cramming everything the native people of this world learned in 18 years of life, into less than 6. Anko had always struggled with book learning and that continued to cause her problems now. Sorry. She could hear the grimace in Naruto's voice. I'll just leave you alone so you can get some rest. Wait. She called quickly, she didn't have the energy to open her eyes. A part of her was fearful of what Madara would do to her if he found out that she had sent Naruto away. But that part was getting smaller and smaller. Nowadays she was mostly just glad to spend time with Naruto. He understood that he owned her and that she was little more than a possession of his, that didn't change the fact that he genuinely cared for her. Something that no one else had ever done. Her mother had never cared enough to come see her at the orphanage and her former master had expressed his feeling of her worth. A slight smirk played at her exhausted face as she thought of how she was forever free of Orochimaru. The cursed seal on her neck stopped working and slowly dissolved after she came to this new world. She was beginning to relish the time she spent with Naruto. Come in, be sure to close the door though, Anko mumbled out tiredly. She slid over as she heard Naruto coming closer to the bed. She patted the spot she just moved off of. She smiled faintly as she felt him climb onto the bed. She reached over and hugged him as she slowly fell asleep. Tanaka Naoto's home. February 9, 1987. Come, little Naruto, Madara's voice called out. It is mathematics today. You have just begun working on your multiplication tables. But Oji-sama, I already know enough maths, the boy whined. Just let me have today off, I'll work twice as hard tomorrow to make up for today, Naruto promised. Madara sighed silently, the boy was an excellent student and well-behaved child. But every once in a while he would act his age and complain. Naruto, Madara said firmly, ignoring any protests. Come, I will not tell you again. Naruto's head dropped as he started walking, his feet literally dragging on the floor, toward the room with the boy's study materials. Oh. Tanaka Naoto's home. October 10, 1988. Naruto was overjoyed that it was his birthday, he had just turned 9 years old. There weren't many presents, just a few from Anko. She had gotten him a Rubik's Cube and all 5 lions that formed Voltron. He didn't expect anything else. His grandfather had told him that if he needed something, it would be his, but his grandfather wouldn't wait for the day of his birth to give it to him. It wasn't just the presents and cake that caused Naruto's good mood. No, it was mainly the fact that he was given his birthday off and allowed to do whatever he wanted. No studying math, no sciences, no boring history, and no frustration that came with learning the English language. His grandfather had wanted him to be multilingual and English was becoming his second language. Naruto. Yes, Oji-sama. Naruto answered, turning away from the partially complete Voltron action figure to look at his grandfather. Come with me, there is something we need to discuss, his grandfather said. Naruto blinked in confusion, his grandfather never bothered him on his birthday. He reluctantly stood and followed his grandfather into the man's study. Naruto took a seat in the comfortable leather chair on the other side of his grandfather's desk. You have turned 9 today, Naruto. His grandfather started after taking a seat on the other side of the desk. There are some truths that I feel you are ready to learn and begin to accept. Naruto knew there were some odd things about his life. There was a man that he didn't know kept unconscious in a shed outside. A few times a week his grandfather would tend to him to ensure the man didn't die. The family that O.C. occasionally came by was also put in the same shed, after his grandfather rendered them unconscious. Anko also had the ability to summon snakes with her arms. There was also that time when he had been attacked by a bear out hunting once. Naruto had nearly been killed and then something happened. He felt an energy and power flow out of him from within. He proceeded to kill the bear with his bare hands. I will start from the beginning. His grandfather said. You, Anko and I do not come from this world. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise. He would have laughed at the joke if his grandfather could make jokes. Something he doubted the man could do. The world we come from, called the elemental countries, is very violent and turbulent. That world is divided into numerous ninja villages and various scattered towns and cities. However, there are 5 main villages in that world: Konohagakure, Sunagakure, Kurigakure, Kumogakure and Iwagakure. I originally helped found Konohagakure nearly 100 years ago. Naruto blurted out, how are you still alive? He then blushed in embarrassment at the tactless question. The Uchiha clan possess a bloodline called the Sharingan. Watch my eyes, Naruto. Naruto recoiled in shock as his grandfather's eyes changed from black to a vibrant red color that had black lines crossing the iris in various directions. These eyes of mine have unexpectedly delayed my aging process. What? Naruto stuttered out, what did they do? There are 2 tiers, the Sharingan and the Mangekyo Sharingan, his grandfather instructed. The Sharingan tier has multiple stages, each identified by the number of tomo surrounding the pupil. 1 tomo in each eye allows the user to perceive the world in extreme detail and slows your perception of the world, almost as though the world was moving in slow motion. 2 tomo in each eye will allow the user to memorize and reproduce any physical and chakra-based movements. Finally, 3 tomo will give you the ability to hypnotize someone and predict future events to a small extent, such as an attack from someone you are fighting. Naruto was in silent awe at how powerful the bloodline sounded. It was just like one of his fantasy books. The second tier, the Mangekyo Sharingan, rewards the user with 4 abilities. The first is Tsukuyomi, a very powerful genjutsu that transfers the caster and their target into an alternate world that the caster has complete control over for 72 hours. The time that passes in the real world is only 1 minute. This is typically used to psychologically torture a target. Naruto grimaced at the idea. The second is Amaterasu, A powerful ninjutsu-based attack that releases a black fire that will burn the target for 7 days and 7 nights. The third ability is S. Yuzunu, the user summons a spiritual being to protect the caster. The final ability granted is the ability to teleport. Naruto smiled widely at the possibility of teleporting around. My eyes are unique. His grandfather with a distant voice, they grant me true precognition and allow me to see events into the distant future occasionally. I was able to see the death of your mother, his grandfather said gravely. Kushina's conception had been unexpected. I believed myself infertile. She was a very passionate girl, his grandfather continued fondly. It caused many arguments between the two. And eventually she became too frustrated with my stoic demeanor and she left in a fit of teenage rebellion. Naruto watched his grandfather smile sadly. She joined Konohagakure. She later met and fell in love with your father. He was Konoha's leader and one of the most powerful ninjas I have ever known. Naruto smiled proudly at that. I knew the death of Kushina was unavoidable. Naruto watched his grandfather wipe a tear away. I also knew that if you had been permitted to stay in the village you would have been assassinated in your youth by people looking to gain revenge against your father. Naruto's heart skipped a beat at that revelation. I had control of a beast, the Kyuubi no Yuko. It was a large kitsune with multiple tails that could level mountains and move seas. I had had enough of the elemental countries. And I decided it was time to leave them. I refused to allow my grandson to stay in that world. So I sent the Kyuubi to attack Konoha, knowing what would happen once it reached the village. Naruto could swear his grandfather was hesitant to say whatever he was about to say. Your mother died giving birth to you, just as I had seen. Your father then sacrificed his life to defeat the Kyuubi the only way he knew how, by sealing it into a newborn infant. His grandfather held his gaze strongly. Naruto felt his gut clench, he couldn't breathe. What his and father had just told him bounced around his head uncontrollably. The whiskers, he finally whispered out. Yes, his grandfather said, seemingly unaffected by the turmoil Naruto was going through. That bear, the one that attacked me. Naruto's mind began making the connection. When I killed it, that was the Kyuubi power. His grandfather nodded. Naruto wasn't sure how to feel. He felt angry. That his father had put a monster inside him, saddened to hear his mother and father's demise, but most of all, he felt betrayed and hurt. His grandfather was the reason his father was dead. His grandfather had killed his father. Naruto could feel his throat constrict with emotion. The one person he loved and trusted the most had taken something away that could never be given back. He couldn't be in the same room with the man anymore. Jumping out of the chair, he rushed for the door and began stumbling toward his bedroom. Naruto pushed past Anko. He distantly heard her call out to him but ignored her. He went to shut and lock his door once he was inside his room, but Anko had followed him and caught it before it could fully close. I just want to be alone, Anko. He nearly yelled, despair. Telly trying to rein in his emotions as tears began spilling from his eyes. Anko pushed him into the room and shut the door behind her. I order you to leave, Naruto stated as firmly as he could, his voice coming out in short and quick sobs. Punish me later if you want, she said without worry, but you're there for me when I have nightmares. I'm gonna be there when you have problems. Anko conference. I gently walked toward him and gathered him into her arms before sitting on the bed, with him in her lap held tightly. She rubbed his back as he buried his head into the crook of her neck. Now tell me what's wrong, she said with a soothing tone. Naruto pulled back and tried to explain. His voice was a rushed, rambling mess mixed with his choked-out sobbing. He couldn't get his voice to work properly. So he just buried his head into her neck again. He took comfort in her embrace and he slowly felt his emotions come under control. Are you okay enough to explain? He heard Anko ask with a soft tone. Naruto pulled his head back and used the back of his hand to wipe away the tears. Yeah, his voice cracked slightly. Naruto took a deep breath before continuing, yeah, I'm okay. Anko wiped a few stray tears from his cheeks. He smiled fondly at the action. Did why you know about the Kyuubi? Naruto stammered out. Anko hummed her answered softly. Personally, I think it's cool, I mean. Not just anyone is strong enough to hold that type of power. Naruto still didn't know exactly what the Kyuubi was. He didn't like the idea that the thing that killed his father was inside his body, though. And my father? Naruto asked. Anko nodded slightly before she quietly responded, yes. And, he started before stopping. This was one question he didn't want to ask, but had to. He needed to know. Did you know that my grandfather sent the Kyuubi to attack Konoha? He hesitantly asked, his vulnerability showing itself in his voice. Anko pulled back to make eye contact before she answered firmly, no, I promise you I didn't. Naruto breathed a sigh of relief. It was hard accepting that his grandfather had caused his father's death, but he wasn't sure how he would have dealt with Anko withholding that information from him. Anko-chan, he mumbled as he leaned his head on her shoulder. Can you? What is it? Anko gently pressed. You can ask me anything. Can you? I know it's stupid, he grimaced at his cowardice. Can you stay with me tonight? Quite bold of you, Naruto-sama, Anko teased. Asking me to bed you, and at such a young age. Naruto blushed and snorted at her usual banter. He smiled at the familiarity of it as he snuggled deeper into her arms and slowly let himself fall asleep. Madara's eyes followed his grandson as the boy completed the last lap around the pond. Madara noticed that his grandson was only panting slightly. The last month of constant exercise had been good for the boy physically. He was unsure of how Naruto was mentally and emotionally. His grandson hadn't discussed the conversation they had on Naruto's birthday. The boy obviously harbored resentment toward him, but his grandson did little more than give him the silent treatment whenever possible. You are fit enough to begin moving on to chakra-related exercises, Madara commented when Naruto approached. We will not be dealing with actual techniques for some time. We will first begin with chakra control training. Madara walked to the side of a nicely sized tree and began his instruction. This is called the wall walking exercise, Madara stated as he began calmly walking up the tree trunk. You apply a small amount of chakra to the soles of your feet, allowing you to adhere yourself to the surface. Too much and you propel away, too little and you will not stick. Once he returned to the ground, he ordered Naruto to start trying. Now you. He watched with amused eyes as the boy was propelled from the tree dozens of times. It would take days before his grandson would get this down. He made a mental note to bring a book to read next time. Outskirts of Tokyo, Japan. November 15, 1988. You will have added incentive to learn this next control exercise quickly. Madara said as he walked his grandson to the edge of the pond. The temperature of the pond is very cold this time of the year. The quicker you learn this, the sooner you can stay dry. In this next chakra control training method, you apply a finer and more precise amount of chakra to allow you to stand on top of the water's surface. Too little and you slip into the water, too much and you displac. The water below your feet and you splash into the water. He displayed the skill by walking onto the water and then off, not bothered by Naruto's astonished face. The amount of chakra needed is much smaller than what you used for wall walking, Madara remarked as he moved to take a seat a decent distance away from the pond. This will be much more difficult for you to learn. Do not allow your emotions to become too intense. Self-control is important for this exercise. He pulled a book from his cloak sleeve and allowed himself to be immersed into the words. He knew Naruto would take weeks if not months to get water walking down. Naruto's room. December 17, 1988. Naruto glanced up as he heard the door open. He closed his eyes in exhaustion after seeing that it was just Anko. So, what's up Foxy-sama? She had taken to calling him that when he talked to her about what the Kyuubi looked like. How long did it take you to learn to walk on water? Naruto asked while allowing his sore muscles to rest. Anko replied thoughtfully, I'm pretty sure it took around 2 weeks. Naruto groaned in response. Geez, I know I learned things fast, but I'm going on over a month and I still don't have it. He remarked with a slight whine. Oji-san said I have a lot of chakra and that makes it harder from what he says, but it'll take me another month at least to get this down. And now, I have to wait for the weather to warm up, the stupid pond is frozen, he exclaimed. He wasn't happy about the frozen water, he wanted to master water walking and didn't like the idea of being forced to wait. Even if it was tiring work to learn. Naruto opened his eyes finally to look at Anko. He sighed in relief as he took in her clothing. She was wearing a thick sweater and warm pants. Nearly every inch of her skin was covered. Something that she rarely did nowadays. Naruto couldn't go a single hour without her teasing a severe blush out of him. He knew it was odd for a developing young woman to flirt with a young child. But Naruto was aware that nothing about their situation was commonplace. It didn't really matter since his life was normal to him. Oh. Outskirts of Tokyo, Japan. December 22, 1988. While the pond's surface is frozen, we will start working on activating your Sharingan, Madara intoned with a cold, emotionless voice. He did not like what he was about to do, but it was necessary. His grandson would need to feel true fear before the Sharingan was unlocked. Madara vanished from the spot he had been standing. Without warning, he appeared behind his grandson with his fist poised to strike at the back shoulder. Naruto didn't have any time to defend himself as he was knocked to the ground a dozen feet away, a large bruise forming where he had been struck. What the heck? Naruto screamed while massaging his shoulder. Madara did not spare any sympathy. Defend yourself, he said, his voice held a dangerous edge as he disappeared again. The day continued on like that for hours. Madara did what he could to cause Naruto to fear for his life. He needed the boy's body to reach deep within itself and call out the Sharingan during moments of terror and anger. Madara was thankful for the Kyuubi. Every bruise, cut and broken bone was healed within minutes because of the Kitsune's unrequested assistance. Oh. Outskirts of Tokyo, Japan. March 3, 1989. Yes. Naruto exclaimed. Joy, pride, happiness, relief and many other emotions filled his voice. I finally got it. Suck it, water. You're my bitch now, he called out while jumping around. Naruto cursed himself for his momentary loss of control as his feet slipped from the top of the water's surface and he was pulled under. After coming up for air, he could hear Anko laughing on the shore of the pond. A blush of embarrassment stained his cheeks. Looks like you're still the bitch, he heard Anko taunt him as he climbed to the surface of the water. Oh. Tanaka Naoto's home. June 8, 1989. Madara was sorting through his food and scrolls inside his study. He had found that his grandson possessed a wind affinity. He assumed it came from the boy's father since Uchihas generally had fire and Kushina possessed a water affinity. They had been in their new world for nearly 10 years and it had been easy to adapt to Japan for the most part. Madara knew they had been most fortunate to appear so close to a recluse like Tanaka Naoto. With the exception of the man's daughter visiting a couple times a year, they hadn't had to worry about much. This allowed them to comfortably adjust to the different technologies of Earth. Madara found the new world to be very civilized and health conscious. In the elemental countries, people rarely lived beyond their 30s. A large percentage were killed and murdered. An even larger amount died from disease and illness. Outside the ninja villages, you were only as safe and protected as your personal strength and wealth could guarantee. That wasn't the case in this new world. Even the weakest and most poor were protected by the laws of the land. A terrified scream from his grandson pulled him out of his thoughts. He was crouching over the boy in an instant. Naruto, wake up, he ordered. The boy was thrashing around in his bed while being haunted by a nightmare. Madara spared a brief glance at Anko as she rushed through the door, a concerned look on her face. Naruto, he stated more forcefully. It did the trick and the boy's unfocused eyes opened wide in fear. Calm yourself. Naruto blinked to get his eyes to adjust while his body shook slightly. Nko took a seat on the boy's bed and pulled him into her lap. It's okay, Anko soothed, it's just a bad dream. It can't hurt you. Naruto frantically shook his head while exclaiming, but it seemed so real. I swear it was, he mumbled. It was like I was trapped inside someone's body. That caught Madara's attention immediately. Anko wiped a stray tear from Naruto's cheek. Anko-san, leave us, Madara ordered. She looked ready to protest, but his glare told her that he wasn't asking. Once the door had shut, he activated privacy seals inside the room and pulled a chair over to the side of his grandson's bed. Oji-san, Naruto said in confusion. Madara inwardly sighed. Since the boy's birthday he had lost a lot of respect from his grandson. He refused to admit it, but it hurt to know. Naruto, I need you to describe your dream, Madara said. You said it was like being trapped inside someone's body, start with that. It was weird, Naruto started. When I saw my arms, they were pale and had freckles. My hands were more hairy too. The boy scrunched his brow in concentration. I had a wedding ring on as well, it was gold, and a watch on my left wrist. I could see and taste everything as though it was my own body, but I couldn't control my movements. Madara felt pleased that his grandson shared this ability with him, and a small amount of sympathy. It could be extremely harsh to possess true precognition. Naruto, what you had was not a dream, Madara asserted. It was a vision. I need you to tell me what happened while you were inside this other man, even the little details. Those can often be the most important. We want to know when and where the event happened, not just what actually took place. But, I don't, Naruto's hushed voice tailed off. Madara recognized the signs of fear and would need to alleviate those concerns. Naruto, his voice was hard and confident, whatever happened in your vision has not happened and I will not allow you to suffer injury. I don't really know where to start. Let us start with the time of day, Madara coaxed. Around noon I think, Naruto said with some uncertainty. Yeah, noon because of where the sun was. The location, a restaurant, Naruto stated with more confidence. One of those places to eat with tables outside the building. And the people, their skin color, the language they spoke, clothing styles. They were Caucasian mostly, Naruto answered with eyes narrowed in concentration. And they all spoke English, but they had a weird accent, oh. His grandson's eyes lit up realization. London, I could see that big clock tower like in that one picture book, Big Ben. Madara was grateful that he began his grandson's education at such a young age. When he had seen how the English language was often used in the international business world, he made sure the boy was at least bilingual. So he knew where this vision would happen, now he needed to know what and when. What happened in this vision? Madara continued to press. Naruto's eyes unfocused slightly in memory, they came. Who did? Remember, Madara softened his tone, they cannot hurt you. This is only a possible future and I will not let them hurt you. Naruto relaxed noticeably at the vow. They were wearing cloaks. Black cloaks and they had masks covering their faces, Naruto said as calmly as the boy could manage. They had thin sticks in their hands and were shooting colored lights out of them. Like the magical wands in some of my fantasy books. When the lights hit people, the people screamed in pain, Naruto said with a grimace. Some of the people, they just stopped moving, I think they were dead after the green light hit them. Madara was now even more thankful that he raised his grandson as a hunter. The years of hunting, killing and skinning large mammals had made it easier for the boy to accept the death of a human, at least more so than an unconditioned child would deal with death. How they needed to figure out when this event would happen. If Naruto was given the vision by the kamis, then he would be expected to affect or change this event in some way. When is all we need now, Naruto? Madara pushed the boy on. I don't know, there were cars on the streets, Naruto rambled on, but I don't know enough about cars to tell anything about the years they were made, Naruto finished with an apologetic smile. That is fine, Naruto, Madara assured the boy. I am surprised you were able to find out as much as you did from your first vision. They come infrequently and are difficult to understand at times. Naruto relaxed at his reassurance. Oji-san, Naruto started with some hesitation, you said on my birthday that you had seen my mother die, even if you didn't send the Kyuubi to attack, right? Madara nodded. And you saw my death, Naruto said with a slight gulp, if you had left me in Konoha. Madara inwardly scowled as he remembered the boy being assassinated before the child even reached his 6th birthday. Yes, I could not tell who ordered it, but you were to be assassinated as a young child. Naruto leaned against his headboard, lost in thought for a moment. I feel no guilt for causing your father's death, Madara said with a calm voice, unaffected by his grandson's glare. Your father would not have been able to properly protect you alone and I was considered a fugitive of Konoha and would have never been allowed to stay inside the village to protect you. I could not allow you to stay inside Konoha and I felt that the elemental countries did not deserve the person you will grow into. I did what was best for you and I make no excuses for my actions. He had no hesitation throughout his short speech. While he wanted to be back on good terms with his grandson, he would not hold back or lie to the boy. I don't, Naruto started to say with clenched fists. I don't like what you did, but I guess I forgive you. You did what you thought was best, the boy forced out. Madara could easily tell from the child's body language that his grandson was trying to convince himself as much as the boy was trying to convince his grandfather. Tanaka Naoto's home. June 13, 1989. Anko yawned as she relaxed into the sitting room futon. It was raining out and she was forced to stay inside where she was becoming more bored by the minute. She had finally reached a level of education that satisfied Madara. The English language had been the toughest thing to learn. She still didn't understand the need to know the language, but Madara had ordered her to begin learning it years ago since it wouldn't do for her young owner to speak a language she didn't understand. Aside from her education, she had kept herself busy over the years by furthering the kunoichi skills that Orochimaru had taught her. Without the cursed seal anymore, Anko found her chakra much easier to use and control. She was very disappointed that she couldn't use the snake summoning contract anymore. However, if losing that ability freed her of Orochimaru, then she was more than happy with the sacrifice. To her surprise, in the past 10 years she had spent with her new owner and his grandfather, Madara had not once attempted to make use of her. She had expected him to fulfill his sexual needs through her for years, but, to her relief, he never once did. Anko Privatel. Why thought that he reproduced asexually and that he was Naruto's grandfather and grandmother. She never vocalized this belief though, she knew her limits when it came to joking with the stoic and unemotional man. Naruto was even more a surprise to her. And it was a most welcome one. He truly cared about her and some days she would lay around thinking about the boy that would set time in his day did a check on her and simply talk to her. He had complete authority over her and he still asked her for her preferences more often than not. Anko smiled as she thought about one of the few times he gave her a direct order. She often struggled with violent nightmares from her time under Orochimaru and inside Konoha, something that she was ashamed of. Naruto had overheard her one night and woke her up. He demanded to know what haunted her dreams. She gave him a brief overview at the time and, while he didn't understand everything that scared her because of his young age, he knew enough that she needed comforting. He ordered her to sleep with him every time she woke up from a nightmare. Nowadays she spent as many days sleeping with him as she did in her own bed. It seemed that the wish she had made when Madara had given her to Naruto had come true and he genuinely cared for her. Anko was snapped out of her thoughts as her owner took a seat next to her, leaning a little into her side. Bored, Anko-chan? Naruto asked conversationally. Yeah, she grumbled, I can't even sunbathe today because of the rain. Anko glanced at the boy and noticed his dreamy expression. It didn't take long to work out what the boy was thinking of. And I was thinking of getting rid of my tan lines too. She faked a look of disappointment. Today was the day I was gonna tan in the nude. She smiled seriously as Naruto turned bright red and spluttered. Just messin' with ya, Foxy-sama, she said before allowing a smirk to play at the edge of her mouth. The first time you see me naked is the same time you pop my cherry. She outright laughed at the boy's wide-eyed expression. She had made sure her owner knew things 9-year-olds wouldn't normally know. She knew Madara hadn't been pleased with her foul mouth. But he hadn't stopped her either. Yeah, I'm bored, she said once she had stopped laughing. Madara-sama says I'm done with learning stuff and I don't enjoy studying like you do. Ith the rain and us not being able to spend a lot of time in the city, there just isn't anything to do today. Naruto nodded in agreement. What's he been doing, by the way? Anko curiously asked. Madara-sama's spent a lot of time in the city for the past week. He didn't tell you? Naruto inquired with furrowed brows. I thought for sure he would have told you. Anko scowled at the GHT that something important had been hidden from her. We're moving, Naruto declared. She blinked in shock before becoming excited. To the city. No, he started before correcting himself. Well, sort of. Not Tokyo. But somewhere in England. Huh, was her intelligent response. Yeah, Naruto said with a nod. I don't know where exactly, but probably somewhere near London. Anko was grateful that all the time she spent learning English wouldn't be wasted, but she was confused. But, why, what's in London? She questioned. Anko didn't miss Naruto's frown. Do you know? Yeah, Naruto said as he looked away from her. Remember my dream from a few days ago? Yep, she said casually. On the inside though, she was concerned. Naruto rarely ever had bad dreams, and he never screamed out in his sleep before. Naruto hesitated uncomfortably, it was actually a vision, of the future. A possible future from what Oji-sama explained. Anko simply stared at him blankly for a moment. Before meeting Madara she would have doubted the possibility of seeing the future, but after traveling to another world, or was it universe? She mentally shrugged. Now, she didn't really have to. Much difficulty accepting the possibility. And Naruto wasn't one to lie about something like this. What did you see? She questioned softly, knowing that he must have seen something unpleasant to wake up screaming. People getting killed, he mumbled. Anko pulled him onto her lap to offer comfort. She relished in the act, soon he would be too large to do this too. Thanks, he murmured quietly. Naruto continued on, notably more relaxed. Anyway, it happened in London, England. Oji-sama says that whenever visions like this happen, they come from the kamis and we're supposed to intervene in some way. I dunno what yet. Maybe we stop it from happening or something. The weird part of the vision is how the people were attacking. They used colorful lights that came out of thin pieces of wood. That looked like wands from fantasy books. Anko thought about that and it did sound weird, a little fruity even to fight with a magical wand, but if it could be used to kill, then it wasn't something to take lightly. The good thing is that we'll officially exist finally, Naruto said with a small smirk. Oji-sama says that he'll be getting us legal identities, so we don't have to be so reclusive anymore. Anko grinned at that. She could finally relax when she went into town. And since we'll be moving closer to a city, we'll be able to have electricity, Naruto smiled widely. Awesome, I really want to check out cable television. She cheered loudly as she pumped a fist in anticipation. Bexley, London, England. August 11, 1989. The now legalized Madara Uchiha was satisfied with his newest home in Bexley, London. It was roughly 30 kilometers away from Big Ben, which had been visible in his grandson's vision. The house sat in a remote location that would permit them to continue their chakra training without fear of being found out. It had been one of the main buying points for him. The house had many amenities for the group. Madara was most pleased with the multiple study rooms, one for him and another for his grandson, and the library that he would need to stock soon. His grandson, and Anko, he supposed, was most excited about the game room with a billiard table and the room with a heated whirlpool bath. It was also much larger than their former home. Madara audibly sighed as he threw of Tanaka Naoto. To the rest of the world, the reclusive former businessman had suffered a severe heart attack. Only 3 people knew that the man's nervous system had been overstimulated by a Raiden-based assassination jutsu. His grandson had not been pleased when the boy learned of Naoto's fate. That had been a tiring conversation, but eventually the boy grudgingly accepted that leaving the man alive was too risky. Madara had other means to deal with Naoto. He had access to a cursed seal developed by Konoha to keep people silent, but he had wanted the boy to face a person's death as early as possible. Especially since they would likely have to kill the men in black cloaks when the time came. Madara hadn't bothered taking any of the man's money after leaving, to do so would only draw attention. But it didn't really matter anyway, Madara always had everything he Ned sealed onto his body, and the countless jewels and precious metals that he had collected in his 100 years of life made worrying about money a non-issue. Getting official identities was also something they no longer had to be concerned with. He had spent the past 10 years studying the intricacies of this world's government and legal system. Using that knowledge and some extensive use of jutsu had made getting legal identities easy. Another thing that had Madara pleased was the sense of energy he felt coming from central London. He had always felt the energy in this world, but it had been so spread out that he couldn't precisely locate its source. He no longer had that problem here. He silently thanked the kamis for sending Naruto that vision. Madara would take his grandson to investigate soon. Charing Cross Road. August 17, 1989. Can you see it? Madara quietly asked. Yeah, his grandson whispered. It had been a few days since they had finished their move to London. Madara decided it was time to track down the source of energy he had felt since arriving on the continent. It hadn't been difficult, most of the energy originated from one location. The group was Curry. NTLY standing in front of a rundown building's entrance. Madara and Naruto could see the energy coming from within the building with their Sharingan. Place looks like a dump, the two males female see. Companion bluntly summed up the exterior of the building. The leaky cauldron, even the name sucks. Madara barely restrained his sigh. Anko-san, I expect you to curb that loose tongue of yours. Anko paled slightly. She apparently heard the unspoken threat. I am unsure of what we will encounter in the building, Madara firmly stated. We must do our best to appear casual and comfortable in the environment while we gather more information and before making any decisions. Do not attempt to use genjutsu or chakra-based techniques, we do not know the capabilities of this unknown energy. Naruto, this means no Sharingan. Both he and his grandson deactivated their Sharingan. Both of you stay close to me and follow my lead. Confident that they would handle themselves well, Anko knew she will be punished if she made a serious mistake, and he knew his grandson was perceptive and intelligent enough. He turned and led them into the building. Once inside, his eyes quickly took in the interior of the leaky cauldron. He inwardly grimaced. The inside wasn't much better than the outside. It was dark, even at midday, and messy. Tables and chairs were scattered on the old and worn unvarnished wooden floor. Madara was surprised to see fire-based chandeliers and candles as the source of lighting. It did little for the aesthetics of the place, something that was easy to see as the place was currently completely empty. Only the bartender was inside the pub. Madara knew the incoming conversation with the man tending the bar would be Anko's greatest test in self-control. The man was unsightly, heavily bald with odd patches of hair scattered around the top and sides of his head, a large nose that appeared as though it had been broken severely at some point in the man's life, a pointy chin that jutted out. And the man appeared to be completely toothless from what Madara could see. Without breaking stride, he walked toward the man at a leisurely pace, as though he took no notice of the rundown condition of the building or the physical appearance of the bartender. How y'all doin'? I'm Tom and welcome to the Leaky Cauldron, Tom said with a gummy smile. Afternoon, Tom, Madara faked a pleasant tone and friendly smile. He paused briefly, hoping the man would give him something to improvise from. Fate was working with him on that day. Hogwarts? The toothless man asked brightly while looking at his grandson. Madara had no clue what that could be, but he had nothing else to work with. He nodded easily. Congratulations, I still remember getting my wand at 11, Tom said cheerfully to his grandson. I'm guessing y'all are muggles, give me a moment and I'll let you into the alley. The man turned away and began messing around behind the bar. Madara never lost his pleasant smile. But he was inwardly frowning at the unfamiliar terms. He could not recall Hogwarts, or muggles, being a part of the slang lexicon that he knew of. The man also seemed to believe his grandson was 11, considering his ignorance. He would allow the bartender to keep that assumption. He watched Tom return and signal for them to follow the man through the door in the back of the building, which they did. Now, the first place y'all will want to go is Gringotts Bank. It's the large white building on the right. Can't miss it, Tom said while they walked through an empty courtyard that was behind the leaky cauldron. You can exchange your muggle money there. After that, most people stop by Ollivanders to get their wands. Kids can't usually wait any longer to get their first wand, the man commented as they stopped in front of a brick wall. Madara watched as the man pulled a thin piece of wood, a wand, he mentally corrected, out of his pocket and tapped a few bricks on the wall. He wall opened to reveal a cramped alleyway with large oddly shaped buildings. The road was filled with many people wearing cloaks moving from shop to shop. Most of them had children that appeared to be his grandson's age. Welcome to Diagon Alley, Tom exclaimed with pride. Madara brought his thoughts back to the man that was currently guiding them. Everything about the man came off as friendly and helpful to Madara. He saw no reason to skip the opportunity to ask a few questions. Refresh my memory, Tom, he said with a smile of feigned embarrassment. I'm getting up there in my age and I forget things easily. But what was a muggle, again? Tom blinked at that before smiling again. Don't worry about it, I'm getting up there too. Muggles are what we wizards call you non-magical people. You best be finishing your shopping soon, Hogwarts will be starting in a couple weeks. And with that, the toothless man ushered the small group through the opening, which promptly closed again once they had passed the archway. Glancing around, Madara did not see any particular reason to continue being as wary as they had been. The people shopping all had their children with them and they were all relaxed and inattentive to the newest members of this Diagon Alley. Well, most didn't pay the group any attention. Occasionally some people would scowl and glare at their clothing. Madara figured it was unpopular to be without a cloak when around wizarding people. You have enough money in your wallet? His grandson asked. Madara heard the emphasis during the question. It wouldn't be wise to use a sealing scroll in this situation. I do, now come. Let us see this, Gringotts Bank. As they began walking down Diagon Alley, Madara couldn't help but feel unimpressed by the underground world. It was like one of his grandson's storybooks about witches and magic had come to life. There was a shop on his left that sold potion cauldrons and one on his right that sold animal ingredients for the potions. He heard Anko gag when she noticed that particular store. Madara nearly snorted at the shop for flying brooms. They seemed to hit every stereotype, even the pointed hats, which most people seemed to go without. Flourish and blots, his grandson whispered as they passed by that particular store. Figures, Anko teased, the first thing that catches your eye is a bookstore and not all the cute girls checking you out. His grandson turned a very slight red at that and the boy glanced around to confirm Anko's statement. That was one of the reasons he permitted Anko to flirt and act the way she did with his grandson. Because eventually the boy would be so accustomed to it that his grandson wouldn't be too affected when women attempted to seduce him in a few years. After continuing past a few shops, they stopped a few dozen yards away from the entrance to Gringotts Wizarding Bank. Tom had been correct, you couldn't miss it. It was very tall, towering over the adjacent buildings, and pearly white. Its doors were also large and seemed to be made of bronze. It was the workers that guarded it that caught Madara's eye though. They were very short, peach-colored humanoid-looking creatures. Their ears were large and pointed, as was their claw-like fingers. What are they? Anko said with unveiled disgust. Goblins, a passerby responded, their tone matching Anko's. Ugly little creatures aren't they? But I suppose they serve a purpose, they protect our money, so we have to put up with them. Madara spoke up once the person had moved on. We have wasted enough time looking at the building, he declared as he began leading his small group into the building. A wide nicely furnished room with marble flooring greeted them once they had entered. There were a dozen people who formed a line waiting for a bank teller to become free. Just to be sure, one of the men not wearing a cloak said after Madara joined the line, 5 pounds is roughly equal to one of these golden galleons. A galleon is worth 17 silver sickles. And how many nuts was a sickle again? The stern-faced woman with graying hair answered. 29 nuts to a sickle. Daddy. The little girl standing next to the man called out. Can I get a flying broom? Michael from down the street always wanted to fly and since his birthday is next week, I could get him one. Ms. Johnson, the older woman said firmly, you are not allowed to reveal anything of the wizarding world to your friends. But Professor McGonagall, the girl, Ms. Johnson, whined, why can't I just tell Michael? He's my best friend since we were little. Madara watched Professor McGonagall pinch the bridge of her nose briefly. We have already gone over this, Ms. Johnson. It is against the law to reveal information on the wizarding world to non-magical people. Now come on. That goblin over there is free. Professor McGonagall, Ms. Johnson and the girl's father walked to the free teller. How much are you going to exchange, Oji-sama? Hi's grandson asked as they waited for their turn. Madara thought about that for a moment, thinking back on some of the objects he seen displayed in the shop windows and the prices they were advertised for. The books displayed at that bookstore averaged 3 galleons. If that man was correct, then that is around 15 pounds, Madara mused. Going from that, I believe we would be fine with 2,500 pounds, but to be safe I'll exchange a bit more. Madara's eyes caught sight of an open teller and he led his grandson and Anko over to the small creature. Yes, the goblin sneered. I want to exchange 3,800 pounds, Madara said. With an unemotional voice while handing the money to the goblin. He saw no reason to fake a friendly tone with such a grouchy little creature. Do you have a bag for it? The goblin questioned harshly. Madara remembered that the man had said they were golden and silver currency. No, I assume you can provide one. The goblin's response was to increase the severity of his sneer before calling out loudly in an inhuman-sounding language that Madara didn't understand. A few goblins scurried around before rushing over to the goblin teller. Here, the teller rudely said, 752 galleons, 13 sickles and 20 nuts. We took the 7 galleons, 3 sickles and 9 nuts out already for the bottomless bag. The goblin nearly threw the bag into Madara's hands before glaring at him, his grandson and Anko. He led his group out of the bank quickly. He knew Anko would snap if allowed in the vile creature's presence for too long. Once outside, he turned to his grandson. Tom recommended we stop by Ollivanders first, and I have to agree. We can see this energy, but we have yet to find out if we can use it, Madara whispered low enough that only Anko and his grandson would hear. I didn't see any Oliva. Enders are a wand shop on the way to Gringotts, Naruto said. It is likely down there. The boy pointed down the side of Diagon Alley they hadn't come from. I doubt it's over there down that dark alleyway. Tom doesn't seem like the type of person to shop from such a dark-looking street. Madara agreed and the group began looking for the wand shop. The street wasn't very long, so it didn't take much time to find it near the end. There it is, his grandson pointed out. Ollivanders, makers of fine wands since 382 BC, I find it hard to believe that this world has remained unknown for that long. With people like Tom working the entrance. Madara silently agreed with him as they walked into the shop. Cramped and dusty were the main ways to describe the interior. Countless thin boxes lined the high ceiling walls. Good afternoon. A soft voice called from the back as an elderly man with white hair and pale silver eyes stepped out. You are Ollivander? Madara inquired. Mr. Ollivander, yes, the man nodded. This shop has been in my family since 382 BC. You've all come for wands, I take it. I sense the magic from you. It's a new feeling of magic. If possible, it feels fresher than any type of magic I have ever felt before. Curious. Ah, I see, only 2 of you for wands then. The boy will have to wait for 2 more years. Madara raised a brow. What prevents him from purchasing a wand now? Ministry law, Mr. Ollivander said with a piercing gaze. He can only own a wand once he becomes 11 years of age. Moving on though, I'm intrigued by what type of wand your fresher magic will choose. Who's first? Madara motioned to Anko to step forward, which she did after his grandson gave her a nice shove. Anko scowled at the boy as she hesitantly walked to where the old man had called her. And you are, Miss? Mr. Ollivander asked while pulling out what seemed to be a tape measure. Which is your wand arm? Anko Midarashi, she said shortly, and what do you mean by wand arm? The tape measure sprung to life and began measuring various parts of her body. Which is your main arm? Oh, well, Anko replied as she batted the tape measure away when it began measuring the size of her nose. I'm able to use both hands and arms equally. Mr. Ollivander did not seem to care for the now unmoving tape measure. It lay forgotten on the ground as he left and returned with a narrow box. Willow with dragon heartstring, the man said as he held the opened wand case out to Anko. A few sparkles flew out of it when she grasped it with her right hand, but the wand maker seemed at a speed with it as he immediately returned the wand to the case and left to grab another. After 10 minutes, Anko was visibly becoming irritated with trying wand after wand. Mr. Ollivander, on the other hand, only seemed to become more excited as time went on. Ah! The man exclaimed as he returned with a dark purple, almost black case. I think this'll do the trick. Elm with firedrake heartstring, 10.5 inches. Anko sighed in pleasure as she grabbed the wand and it shot out a large amount of sparks. Madara watched her nearly run back to Naruto's side, obviously grateful to be done with her selection. Now you, Mr. Uchiha. Madara replied, taking Anko's former spot. I can use both hands as well. However, I'm right-hand dominant. He glared at the tape measure as it returned to life and approached him. It seemed to cower beneath the heated gaze as it chose to rest itself on a dusty table nearby. His wand selection took twice as long as Anko's had, eventually finishing with his selection. Madara felt a shiver of power run through his spine as he held the 13-inch, Yuan rock feather wand. Excellent, Mr. Ollivander cheered. Now, that'll be 23 galleons total. Madara reached into his wizard currency bag. But before he had begun removing any of the coins, a question entered his mind. Mr. Ollivander, he said, are there any ways to hold our wands, other than simply in our pockets? It does not seem wise to hold such an important item in such an unsecured manner. Absolutely, Mr. Uchiha, the man answered with a nod. There are wand holsters that attach to your forearm and allow you to quickly and easily draw your wand whenever the intent is there. We'll take two, along with the wands, Madara declared. A few minutes later they were back in Diagon Alley. Where to now? Anko asked while tweaking the one of the holster straps on her arm. Flourish and Blots, Naruto answered her, it's the best location to find out more about this place. Madara nodded in agreement, I agree. After that we will take a look down that dark side alley across from Gringotts. It did not take long to make their way back to the bookstore. Once they had entered, Madara was pleased with the place. Flourish and Blots was the largest store on Diagon Alley and it was filled with reading material. There were 2 floors packed with books. He could see around 24 children, escorted by adults choosing various books. He assumed that Hogwarts was a school for children and they were buying the school textbooks. Anko's voice whined, too many books. Madara silently sighed. He did not wish to deal with a complaining Anko. Naruto, the boy turned to him, take Anko and look around, try to find out whatever you can. His grandson nodded and dragged Anko off by the hand. Now that he was alone he glanced around for the proprietor of the shop, or at least someone who worked at it. After seeing the person he was looking for he casually made his way over to them. Excuse me, he said with a friendly smile, my grandson will be entering Hogwarts soon and I was wondering if you could point me toward books that would help our adjustment. Madara hoped he was correct in his presumption that Hogwarts was a school for children. That cute blonde boy you walked in with? The saleswoman asked with a smile. He's going to be a little heartbreaker. I've never seen such an exotic and good-looking boy. Madara nearly scowled at the woman, he did not wish to waste time gossiping. Yeah, takes after his father, he forced out with a warm tone. He's such a studious boy too. Loves reading and learning new things. I would like to know what he's talking about though, reason I desperately need your help. He tried to direct the conversation back to the original topic. Are you sure you aren't his father? The woman asked as she shamelessly looked him over. You're definitely handsome enough to be. Madara inwardly sighed. I find you pleasant to look at as well, he teased with a slight smile. It took him a while, but he was able to get her to truly assist him in finding out more information on the wizarding world. The saleswoman, Kate, tested his patience constantly. Her behavior cycled between making blunt attempts at flirting with him, completely forgetting what they had been discussing, and gossiping and making snide comments about one of the customers. As much as he wanted to be done with her, he ended up spending over an hour leading her around learning as much as he could. By the time he excused himself from her company to rejoin his grandson he had over 20 different books. Most of them general information guides about the wizarding world and the different branches of magic. Naruto, Madara called out once he had located his grandson. The boy had his head buried in a large book while Anko was sleeping on a chair beside him, drool leaking from her mouth. His grandson jerked his head up. I found out quite a bit, Oji-sama. There we re a group of kids that I was able to hang out with, I was able to pick up a bunch of information. Good, Madara said. Kate was helpful as well. It was only after he had spoken did he realize the mistake he made. Kate, Naruto said with a grin. Ah, the woman you were spending time with. I didn't know you were on a first-name basis with her already. It was times like this that made him regret not killing Anko. Naruto. She already pushed my patience to their limit, I have no desire to joke about with you. You will leave it be, he sternly ordered. Kate had been the most obnoxious and thoughtless woman he had ever met. Wow, his grandson said, an expression of awe on his face that made Madara inwardly groan. This Kate seems to bring out a rare passion in you. Perhaps I'll have a mother figure now. Anko-chan and I will plan the wedding. You did get her number, didn't you? I'll address I suppose for the wizarding world. When's the first date? Naruto, he said, voice holding a very dangerous edge. You will drop this matter or we will be sparring once we return home. He was satisfied when his grandson turned white and kept quiet. Now, how many books have you picked up? 18. His grandson said as he motioned to the stack of books on the table. 1 for potions, 2 for transfiguration, 2 for charms, 2 for defense against the dark arts, 1 for arithmancy, 1 for ancient runes. 2 for divination, 2 for warding, 1 copy of Hogwarts, a history, 1 copy of Wizarding World Laws and 3 general books about the wizarding world and magic. Mad. Era was pleased with the boys' selection. They would have ample time to come back to Diagon Alley and purchase more books at a later date, but for now this would do. Help me place them in this book trunk that Kate gave me. Madara said with a sharp glare to cut off any teasing. Afterwards we'll check out that dark side alley before heading home. We'll look into the other stores on Diagon Alley W. Hen we have more information on this world. And wake Anko up, she's drooling. The books had cost more than Madara had anticipated, but it didn't matter. 150 galleons later, they were outside the bookstore and walking toward the dark alley. Just as they were about to enter it, they were stopped. Wait, stop, don't go in there. A woman called out frantically. Madara and his group turned to CAS. Hoarder than average overweight red-headed woman hustling over to them. Thank Merlin I got to you in time. She exclaimed. You don't want to go in there, trust me. You Muggle-born don't know it, but there is nothing but nefarious things down that way. What do you mean? Naruto asked. Nocturne Alley is the place for dark objects and people, she whispered, as though sharing a secret. Nothing but evil down that way, I tell you. Madara quickly went over his options. He could tell the woman to leave and simply walk down Nocturne Alley anyway, but that would draw far more attention than he would want. He could also pretend to leave and simply return once the woman was gone, but he didn't really need to see the other alleyway that badly today. He went with the third option, he would simple. Why leave and return at a later date when they had more information on the wizarding world? They still needed to explore all the other stores on Diagon Alley, so they would need to return eventually anyways. Thank you very much, miss, he said with a forced smile. Mrs. Weasley dear, Molly Weasley, she returned the smile. Don't mention it, I had been buying some last-minute supplies for my twin-ass. Ons, they're going off to Hogwarts this year, and I noticed you people. I just couldn't, in good conscience, allow you to enter such a bad place without warning you. Well, thank you again, Mrs. Weasley, he said with a warm tone. We need to be leaving now, do you mind telling us how to get out of Diagon? Tom was the one that opened the entrance for us. Oh, that's easy, Mrs. Weasley replied, you can flow or apparate out. But if you want to go through the leaky cauldron in trance, you just tap the green brick on this side of the wall with your wand and it opens right up. You have a pleasant afternoon. Madara faked another smile and led his grandson and Anko away from the woman and toward home. Anko chuckled while shaking her head. If there was anything she loved about her new home in London, it was television and videotaped movies. She had begged, literally begged, Naruto to buy her the entertainment set and a large collection of movies to go with it. She knew she was being lazy spending so much time on the couch watching television, but she couldn't help it. It was just too fun to spend the day watching various imported movies with platefuls of dango. You're watching that movie again. Her owner's voice called out from the doorway. She would have glanced over at him, but that would mean turning away from one of her favorite comedies. Shish, she shushed him as he took a seat next to her. We find out about a new underground world and you can't be bothered to get off the couch and learn about it. She heard the admonishment in his voice, she simply didn't care. Ed Stryker had her attention and she would be damned if he lost it. It had been 2 weeks since their trip to Diagon Alley and her Elmond Firedrake wand was lying on the desk in her room collecting dust. I looked at some of those books you bought, Anko said distantly, her attention still focused on the screen. It's not my fault that the magic is lame. Tickling and tripping spells are kinda interesting. But what fun are they if I can't use them to mess with people in public? The laws keeping her from using magic in public were a major killjoy for her. What was the purpose of turning things different colors if you couldn't use it to embarrass other people? If the sign at the wand shop had been any indication, then the magical world had been hidden for well over 2,000 years. Anko knew she wasn't the smartest person, but even she could understand that the wizarding world must have some way to detect magical use in non-magical places. It simply wasn't worth the risk of getting Naruto and Madara caught. That isn't all there is, there are some amazing things that magic seems to be able to do. You can make and animate objects to do what you want. Puppetry, she returned, off. Earring a ninja art that could do the same. Okay, you can make things shrink small enough to fit into your pocket. Sealing, she interrupted. She heard his sigh. You can also change things from one object into a different one. Something. Yeah, I just don't see why I would ever need to turn a matchstick into a needle or change a beetle into a button, she shrugged as she bobbed her head. To the musical beat of Ted Stryker having a dance-off with Elaine. Transfiguration. She could hear the strain in his voice as he was beginning to get irritated. And that isn't all it can do, that's only the start. It's to get you ready for the harder stuff later from what I read. She shrugged uninterestedly. He sighed again. Well, what about potions? You like coming up with new poisons, though. You'd really like that branch of magic. Meh, she said, still distracted by the movie. I haven't poisoned anyone since we left the elemental countries. Defense against the dark arts. You still like to spar with me. So you should really like that subject. Maybe later. Come on, he exclaimed with a small amount of frustration, there has to be something. I just don't see why I should waste my time with that stuff when it would probably take months, maybe years, to get to the good stuff. I don't see how you can be concerned with wasting time when you've spent almost every day on that couch watching those movies. That has to be, like, the 10th time you've seen that stupid movie. Anko immediately paused the airplane. Videotape and turned to glare at him. What did you just say? She growled, angered that he would dare slander a classic piece of art. Naruto paled slightly. Look, Naruto, she stressed the use of his name in anger, I get it that you like learning new stuff. You already know I don't reading when I don't need to. That just isn't me. Now, I don't mind helping you with it, but right now I'd rather not bury my head in a book. That one Hogwarts book you borrowed. UGHT said you should be going to that school in a couple years, maybe then I'll be interested in learning more, but right now I just want to sit around and relax. Naruto sighed deeply. Okay, I'm sorry, he apologized. Good. She gave him a grin to show there weren't any hard feelings. Now, just sit back and enjoy, Foxy-sama, she said as she pulled him to her side. The funniest line in the movie is next. Anko pushed the play button on the remote. You ever been in a cockpit before? A man asked from the television. No sir, I've never been up in a plane before. A young boy replied. You ever seen a grown man naked? Oh. Madara's study. September 4, 1989. When are we going back to Diagon? Naruto asked as he took a seat in front of his grandfather's desk. We only looked at the wand shop and the bookstore last time. Soon, his grandfather replied without looking up from the book the man was currently reading. Perhaps in 2 weeks. How is Anko doing in her studies? PFF'd. Naruto scoffed. I think she's currently studying the Police Academy series of movies at the moment. I don't think she's really touched her wand since she got it and has only glanced at the books I bought. Do I want to know what that is? His grandfather said with a curious glance. Naruto briefly allowed himself to imagine his stoic and unemotional grandfather watching movies like Airplane and Police Academy. He couldn't help but smile widely at the thought. No, Naruto said while restraining his laughter, probably not. His grandfather said, dismissing the topic. Tell me, what are your thoughts on what you have learned so far from the books you purchased? Naruto took a moment to gather his thoughts. Well, charms looks very useful. In that branch, they have the memory charm, which can actually erase people's memories. The bubblehead charm, it's supposed to allow you to breathe underwater. I imagine you could use it to protect against poisonous gases too. What else? Oh. The unbreakable charm and the hover charm both have lots of uses. There were a lot of other spells in that branch that seemed useful, but those were the main ones, I think. His grandfather nodded in agreement. And the other types of magic? Naruto hummed thoughtfully. Transfiguration could have a lot of uses. I don't really know yet, I didn't read too much into it since it seems to be really theory-based. I guess it all depends on how far a person's imagination can take that branch and what all is possible. It definitely looks like one of the more useful branches if a person can become skilled at it. But I can't really be sure until I have my own wand to mess around with. Yes, his grandfather nodded, I believe that type of magic to have quite a bit of potential as well. Continue. Defense against the dark arts seems very disappointing compared to nin and genjutsu, Naruto commented. Oh, I always forget to ask this, but when do you plan to teach me taijutsu? You had Anko show me some stuff. How to punch and kick properly, as well as basic grapples and throws, but nothing compared to the level that you and Anko-chan can fight at hand to hand. He was eager to learn taijutsu for a few reasons. He liked becoming a better fighter, he loved learning new things, and he also liked the physical aspects of the art. However, the main reason he wanted to learn taijutsu was the fact that he could freely demonstrate it in public and easily pass it off as simply being a trained fighter, something he couldn't do with ninjutsu. His ninja training had mostly involved ninjutsu because of how large his chakra reserves were. Naruto knew he was progressing quickly with his wind-natured techniques. On the other hand, his genjutsu training would have to wait a few more months, at least, until his control was better. Not for a few years. His grandfather's voice brought the boy back to the present. Your body does not have the appropriate muscle mass or reach to make full use of the skills. It would only make it more difficult to teach you a form properly once you're much taller and heavier. I see no point in wasting time training you improperly when you're spending a large amount of time working on your chakra control. Naruto could see where his grandfather was coming from, but he still sighed in disappointment. Back to the topic at hand, Madara said. You were saying about defense against the dark arts. Yeah, Naruto nodded slightly. Dada just seems so weak, I guess, compared to the ninjutsu that you've taught me. Quote. His grandfather shook his head in disagreement. While I do agree that compared to shinobi skills, that branch of magic can appear weak. Do not, and I cannot stress this enough, underestimate magic as a weapon. Are some creatures that I have read about that are only affected by certain spells. Moving on though, what about the other types of magic? You purchased a large selection of books. Well, Naruto started hesitantly. Knowing that he hadn't really studied the books on the other branches. I haven't really looked at potions, I figured since I can't use a wand for a while that I could look at it later. I haven't touched the 2 divination books I got yet. Ancient runes and arithmancy I glanced at, but I put them away for later because I wasn't sure all of what magic can do and I wanted to wait before studying those branches. The warding books I've gotten are pretty interesting though, but I can't really do much with that branch without actually being able to use a wand. I'm kinda stuck for now with most of it. His grandfather nodded as the man took everything that Naruto had said in. And of the wizarding world, what is your opinion on them? Naruto sighed, he had spent a lot of time talking to those kids in Flourish and Blots and he hadn't been impressed at all. From the couple of books I've looked at and what the kids said at the bookstore, it seems messed up, he said with a frown. There seemed to be a lot of prejudices, and those kids had been taught them from their parents according to what they said. Like, remember how people glared at us in our clothing? I found out it was because a bunch of wizards don't like muggles or muggleborn. That's why they were looking at us like that. Madara nodded, what else? The book Wizarding World Laws in you has a lot on non-human races. I don't understand much of the actual laws, but I could easily see that most of them go against anything considered non-human, Naruto said with a frown. Yes, his grandfather agreed, I have found the same to be true. This brings me to something important for you to think about until it comes time for you to attend Hogwarts. I want you to consider whether or not you actually join the wizarding world. No matter your choice, we will want to impede the black-robed men in masks, but I am getting more confident as each day goes by that our chakra techniques will be enough to handle them. Everything else could be learned through books, I believe. Naruto was about to speak, to inform his grandfather that he had already chosen to go to Hogwarts. Even if he didn't like the world and its people, he wanted to learn more about the actual magical world. And not just from books. However, before he could speak, his grandfather cut him off with a raised hand. Do not respond, the man firmly stated. I do not want an answer now. This is your decision. Simply keep it in mind as we learn more about the world. Naruto reluctantly swallowed his reply and nodded. Diagon Alley. September 28, 1989. We should stop by that one robe shop first, his grandson commented as the 3 of them walked along Diagon Alley for their second trip. It would help us blend in much easier if we wore robes. Anko hummed in agreement. As much as I hate the idea of wearing one of those cloaks, she said while glancing around at the people leering at them. I don't like the way some of the people are looking at us. Reminds me too much of how Konoha used to look at me, she mumbled just loudly enough for him and his grandson to hear. His grandson reached over and gently squeezed her hand, offering his support. Anko returned a smile in gratitude. It's the building after Flourish and Blots, Naruto supplied as they walked past various stores. There were much fewer people on Diagon Alley that day. Madara figured it was because the children were currently attending Hogwarts. I wonder just how large this community is, Madara mused out loud while taking notice of the shop for robes. His grandson answered him. Hogwarts. A history said the average class of students nowadays is around 45 kids per year, so around 315 kids total. The book also said that before the previous war in the 70s, the average student body was over 450. We will need to attempt to find out a more definitive number, Madara remarked in response as they entered Madame Malkin's robes for all occasions. The shop was about what Madara had expected. Wide open space with clothing racks grouped together. There were a few sectioned off rooms near the side, he assumed they were changing rooms, and a single rectangular pedestal for the workers of the shop to take measurements of their customer more easily. A short woman with an attractive face, red hair and blue eyes walked out from a back room and greeted them. Welcome, she said with a warm and friendly smile. I'm Madame Malkin, what can I help you with? Robes, please, his grandson spoke for them. For all three of us, but we were curious about different kinds of material they were made from. Oh, she exclaimed while turning to face the boy, surprised to be addressed by the youngest member of the group. Well, I only work with 3 different types of fabric. Cotton, silk and magically enhanced silk. What's the fancy silk do? Anko asked. Madame Malkin's smile strained after Anko's phrasing. Well, it feels and looks very similar to regular silk. But it's a stronger fabric. Very resistant to tears and being stretched, it's also much more resistant to staining from foods and drinks. Madara spoke for the first time since entering. Measure is for 3 of those robes in black. Naruto stepped onto the pedestal after the woman motioned for one of them to come forward. Can you make the sleeves longer on mine? Naruto requested as she began measuring him. To just below the fingertips when my hands are relaxed at my sides. Madame Malkin looked confused for a moment before acquiescing. Madara was proud at the forethought his grandson was showing. This would permit the boy to make hand seals without being noticed by anyone. Madara still prohibited the group from using chakra-based techniques in the wizarding world, but it was good to see his grandson thinking ahead. He made sure that the same alteration was done to both his and Anko's robes. The process for getting robes was much more pleasant than when they had shopped for wands. Madame Malkin was a kind and friendly woman who was very skilled at her job. She also lacked the eccentricities that Mr. Ollivander had in spades. Much better, Anko commented as she looked around Diagon Alley at the people who simply ignored their existence. Madara shook his head in disappointment at the nearly negligent way magical people went about their daily lives when there wasn't anything they detested visible. A simple change in clothing was enough for these people to not realize that they were the same people. The trunk shop across from Ollivander's will be our next stop, Madara stated as he began leading them in that direction. Can't you just shrink the stuff and put it into your pocket? Anko questioned as she followed behind him. He sighed in irritation. I could, however. Some magical items and potion ingredients react poorly to direct magic being used on them. You would know this if you had bothered to read any of the books that Naruto purchased, Madara said with a slight glare. There it is, Naruto exclaimed, trying to end an argument before it truly began. Elephants never leave home without their trunks and neither should you. Anko read the sign of the trunk shop's name. What the hell kind of name is that for a store? Naruto nodded in agreement. Yeah, it's a mouthful. Madara did not express his opinion, but he silently agreed. Wizards seemed to come up with some of the most ludicrous names for objects and places. I think if I had a trunk shop, I would call it Planet of the Crates, Naruto commented, a play on words of that Planet of the Apes movie you have, Anko-chan. What would you call yours if you had a trunk store? Naruto asked conversationally. Trunks by the great Anko-sama. She loudly declared. Not as witty as yours. But my store would totally kick your store's ass. Madara shook his head at their antics as he walked through the doors of the oddly named trunk store. He nearly sighed at how similar the conditions were to Ollivander's. The inside was cramped, cluttered and dusty. Madara couldn't understand how people could allow their shops to remain in such a poor state, especially when these people could simp. Lee magic the building cleaner and more organized. A man with short dark hair, pale skin and a sour expression on his face appeared from behind one of the stacks of trunks. Yes, the man gruffly questioned. Madara glanced around the shop for a moment. I am looking for a trunk that can handle fragile magical objects and potion ingredients as well as many other objects. It needs to have a large amount of interior storage space as well. The man pointed at a large trunk near the wall. It was, by far, the best looking trunk in the store, mainly because it was the only one that was completely clean. Best trunk we have is that 7-compartment trunk. Just touch it with your wand and it'll shrink itself small enough to fit into your pocket. Touch it again and it'll enlarge itself automatically. The man said as he demonstrated the shrink and regrow feature. Each compartment also has its own lock and is separated from the other compartments. The salesman took in the group's expensive robes. Something that Madara did not fail to notice. It'll cost you though, they're not cheap. Madara inwardly frowned. He had more money than his grandson would be able to spend in dozens of lifetimes. But he didn't like to throw money away. The problem he had in this situation was that he didn't have any position to barter from. Madara stared piercingly into the man's eyes. How much per trunk? The salesman seemed to cower slightly under the gaze. 200 galleons. Madara's glare increased. But for you, only 170 galleons. He agreed to the price and they were soon walking out with 3 of the 7-compartment trunks. Madara had selected the basic black, Naruto had decided on the navy blue color while Anko had picked up a dark purple trunk. Since they were becoming low on wizarding currency, they were walking toward Gringotts to exchange more credit cards, Naruto mentioned on the way to the Goblin Ran Bank. Oji-sama, you should see if there is anything like that in the wizarding world. Madara nodded. I had planned on enquiring about something of that sort. It seems illogical to be forced to count out large quantities of coins every time someone wishes to purchase something. His grandson hummed in agreement, but wizards don't seem to be very logical from what I've read and seen. Ain't that the truth? Anko remarked as her eyes locked onto what seemed to be a magical pet store. Oh, Foxy-sama. Please, can we go there next? She excitedly asked while pointing at the magical menagerie. Sure, I guess, Naruto uncertainly replied as they walked into Gringotts. A little freaked out by her girlish actions. Without any children shopping for school supplies, there were plenty of tellers open. What do you want? The goblin grumbled. Madara raised a brow at how rude the goblin race seemed to be. Your banking services, what features and benefits do you provide? How much you got to deposit? Madara frowned at the riposte. Explain the various evils and what one would receive at each level, Madara said unemotionally. The goblin sneered at him harshly. Anything up to 2,000 galleons, we store the gold but you don't get any protection beyond what we normally give. Up to 10,000 galleons has added security. Beyond that is our highest security vaults that are stored deeper into Gringotts and has the best security we offer. The goblin's glare and sneer increased in intensity. But that doesn't matter. Gringotts has never been robbed, human. Now, how much you got to deposit? You're wasting my time loitering around. Madara sighed. He did not carry enough on him to open up even a medium security vault. He made a mental note to bring much more money with him the next time. I will open up a vault during my next visit. For now, I want to exchange 4,000 pounds and I will need a bottomless bag for it. His grandson looked at him curiously for purchasing a second wizarding currency bag, but he had need for it. A moment later the goblin was handing the bag over. 792 galleons, 12 sickles and 20 nuts. One last thing, Madara said, do you have some form of credit or debit cards, or possibly bank notes for larger denominations? Only for customers with vaults. The goblin growled, now leave. Once outside Gringotts, he poured a large quantity of galleons from his newest bank bag into his nearly empty older one. He then handed the old bag to his grandson. Use it however you wish, Madara commented. I will be returning to the bookstore and then browsing the apothecary. I believe you and Anko were going to explore the animal store nearby. Naruto didn't have any time to prepare himself as his hand was firmly grasped and he was quickly pulled behind Anko. Upon entering the magical menagerie, Naruto breathed a small sigh as he took a cursory glance around. The pet store was large and filled with various cages and aquariums. Considering how many different types of animals the place had, Naruto thought it was well organized and clean. He was thankful that at least one store on Diagon Alley was properly taken care of. Even Flourish and Blotz had stacks of books simply lying around in large piles. Naruto wasn't sure why Anko had wanted to come to this store so badly. He shrugged as he was pulled to a random display case. Anko looked inside. It's some type of poisonous slug, Anko supplied after she read the sticker on the glass. It says the toxin causes hallucinations. Naruto couldn't help but ask, why would anyone want a poisonous slug? Sure, it's kinda cool that it's poisonous and all, but that doesn't change the fact that it's still just a slug. Anko shrugged as she dragged him to the next case. That continued for far more time than Naruto wanted to spend in a pet store. He was pulled from one absurd animal to the next. Rats that were supposedly intelligent, giant poisonous snails, various species of birds that were educated in delivering post, jewel-encrusted turtles, dozens of various types of regular and magical snakes. Anko-chan, come on, Naruto said pleadingly, we've been here for an hour and a half. In response, Anko squealed loudly and ran over to one of the larger cages. Naruto couldn't see what was in it, but the girlish scream from Anko made him a little nervous. She's adorable, she said breathlessly. He slowly made his way over to the cage and glanced in. It was filled with nearly a dozen different cats of various sizes and types. One in particular caught his eye. It was stunning to look at. The young long-haired kitten was covered in a soft, beige-colored fur coat, except on the tail, nose and paws. Those were a smoky gray coloring. The eyes of the animal were a very pretty, soft shade of light blue. Naruto could easily see why Anko called it adorable. There was some downside to the kitten though. It was currently glaring murderously at all the other cats while snarling and hissing dangerously at them. Figures, Naruto mentally rolled his eyes. Anko-chan final. Lee finds an animal that she likes and not only is it very cute, but it's extremely temperamental and dangerous. Just like her, I suppose. Anko-chan, she looks mean, he said while cautiously staring at the kitten. She shook her head. Nah, she's just shy. Shy. He looked at her incredulously. Look, she just attacked that black cat, I think it's bleeding now. Anko gave a dismissive wave. That's just how they play, she said while fondly gazing at the kitten. Hey, she called out loudly while looking around the shop. How do I get some damn service in this place? 10 minutes later, they were sitting outside Florine Flortescue's ice cream parlor eating a few scoops of ice cream while waiting for Madara to find them. Come on, precious, Anko cooed softly while holding an ice cream-covered fingertip out to her new pet. Show Mama Anko you're a big girl. Just a lick, you can do it baby girl. Naruto watched in morbid fascination as the woman who didn't have a single motherly bone in her body treated the killer kitten as though it were her own child. There you go, cutie, she continued to coo, you're a big girl, aren't you? Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Naruto was beginning to wonder if the woman had lost her mind. Where the hell is this coming from? He sighed loud enough to catch her attention. You have to change her name, Naruto stated, you can't keep that name, it'll get confusing. Anko merely waved off his concerns. What's so hard to understand about it? I love Dango, so it only makes sense to name her Dango. Naruto could only blankly stare at her as she continued to feed the kitten ice cream with her fingertip. He was prevented from trying to reason with the woman when Madara rejoined them. Naruto, his grandfather started while eyeing the young cat. What is that? Naruto could only rub his forehead in mild frustration. It's Dango. Anko-chan's pet, she's half Neasel. What is special about a cat being half Neasel? Naruto summed up what the pet store worker had informed him and Anko. They're basically just smarter than regular cats and can sometimes detect people that are distrustful. The man leveled his hard gaze on the kitten for a moment. So long as it does not cause any problems, she may keep it. I'm right here, Anko exclaimed. It's rude to talk like that about someone when they're right there. His grandfather ignored her. I have purchased a large selection of various books as well as a cauldron and decent supply of potion ingredients. There are no other shops on Diagon Alley that are worth looking into at the moment. Let us see what this, Nocturne Alley, that the red-headed woman warned us about has to offer. Unlike Diagon Alley, Nocturne Alley only had one side with shops, the other was simply a brick wall that ran the entire distance of the darkened short alleyway. There were only 8 stores in the alley and most of them caused Naruto to sneer in disgust. The first store they passed by appeared to be a wizard currency loan agency. Naruto didn't even want to know what the wizarding people used as collateral. The very next store was a pawn shop that sold secondhand jewelry. After that is when it started to get bad. The third store sold mostly alcohol, but Naruto suspected from some of the smells that emanated from the store that it also sold drugs. Hold your breath, sweetie, Anko quietly ordered her pet. Mama doesn't want you to become sick from the bad smells. Following that is when it turned even worse. The next store was clearly a brothel. Naruto gagged in disgust at some of the sexual acts he seen being performed outside the building. Don't look, Dango. Anko quickly covered the kitten's eyes and ears to preserve the cat's modesty. Naruto rolled his eyes at how stupid she was being. He entertained the thought that perhaps she had been replaced by body snatchers and that was the explanation for her unusual behavior. Immediately following that was an inn that made the leaky cauldron look like the Ritz-Carlton. The 6th building, the bitter end, was a pub that clearly catered toward the rougher members of wizard kind. Naruto knew his grandfather would eventually return to the bar at a later date to find out more about the unsavory side of the wizarding world. The 7th store had a sign out front that simply stated, books. It was the first store to truly interest the group and they made their way inside. The interior was very disappointing for Naruto. He had expected a nice selection of books on the darker side of magic, instead he was treated to small variety of around 50 different books. The size of the interior was also much smaller than it should have been from what he could see. The only other occupant in the store approached them. How can I assist you 3? The attractive woman with straight red hair greeted them. His grandfather did not hesitate to respond. You may show us the rest of your selection. Naruto blinked at that. That did make sense. The inside was about half the size it should have been. If the store sold questionable, or even illegal books, then it wouldn't make sense to Naruto to have them displayed openly. I'm sorry, but everything I have is out. The woman said with a shrug. I apologize for the lack of choices, but it's been a rough month for us. The interior of your store is 40% smaller than it should be. The dust coating the wall over there. His grandfather motioned to the right side of the back wall, is thicker than on the left side. Out of the approximately 50 books you have shown, at least 30 of them, from what I can see at first glance, are sold at Flourish and Blots. We wish to see your true selection, presumably behind the left side of the back wall. The woman gave an appreciative grin. I'm impressed. You have a great eye for details, but that doesn't change the fact that what I have available is already out. Naruto watched his grandfather stare the woman down for a few moments before responding. Very well. Madara said with his unemotional voice, I will return at a later date to browse everything. His grandfather motioned for Anko and Naruto to follow. How did you notice all those things so quickly, Oji-sama? He questioned after they had exited the building. Part of it comes from my Sharingan training, you will eventually reach my level of skill in your bloodline as well. That training will cause your natural eyesight to be much better than it normally would be, his grandfather whispered only loud enough for him and Anko to hear. And the other part is simply experience and training. Winning a battle is as much about the mind as it is about the body. You must train yourself to notice and recall the small details, as it is often those insignificant details that will lead you to succeed where others would fail. Naruto swore to himself to train harder, to hopefully one day be as skilled as his grandfather. When will you return to that store? Naruto asked, as they neared the final store in Nocturne Alley. Once I understand more about this world. There is no rush seeing as how we have yet to fully experience the legal side of magic, his grandfather lied while opening the door to Borgin and Burks. The interior of the final store was similar to what Naruto had seen as at a flea market. Various items were scattered around the place on tables, mantels and shelves. Thick dust coated most of the items, making Naruto wonder just how long some of them had been sitting around. A man with unkempt brown hair and tea-stained yellow teeth approached them. "What can I do for you?" the man asked while taking in their appearance and robes. Dango hissed in response and Anko attempted to calm the cat down. Naruto was curious if that was what the pet shop salesman had meant by Neasels being able to sense distrustful people. "We wish to browse unhindered," his grandfather replied while glancing around the shop. They spent less than 30 minutes looking around the store. Madara refused to allow Naruto or Anko to touch any of the items for concern of them being cursed. Most of the items were of no interest for Naruto, things such as human bones, hangman ropes, creepy masks and various ornate-looking containers. However, a few objects did interest him. There were a small selection of poison-dipped daggers, a small music box that played an eerie song and a small collection of two-way mirrors that worked similar to telephones. Naruto made a mental note to come back at some time later and look into purchasing some of the stuff that caught his eye. Once they were leaving the alley for home, Naruto couldn't help but be severely disappointed. Nocturne Alley for the most part had been a dump. He could easily see why the redhead from the Our Week had warned them away from the place. Southern Thailand. July 3, 1990. As he quietly leapt from tree to tree through the rainforests of southern Thailand, Naruto allowed his thoughts to wander as he scanned the canopy with his Sharingan. "You have progressed rapidly in your ninjutsu training and you are doing well in genjutsu," his grandfather announced as they were walking to the sectioned-off area near their London home that they used for sparring. "Today will be a serious spar to test how far you have come, no limitations." Naruto inwardly cringed as he heard that. His grandfather did not play or joke around when it came to sparring in general, but serious spars were even more brutal. In every fight so far, Naruto struggled to keep up with his much older and experienced grandfather while the man beat the young boy to within an inch of death. The two lined up approximately 50 yards away from each other, both staring each other down, bodies tense and Sharingan eyes focused slightly below their opponent's eyes. Naruto had learned the hard way about meeting his grandfather's gaze. Now his mind knew to never make eye contact in battle scenarios. Naruto clenched and lenched his fists in quick pumps as he waited for the start to their fight. His grandfather had trained the boy to never wait for any specific words or hand movement to start. He was waiting for anything that would signal their start. A flock of birds cast a shadow nearby and Naruto disappeared from the field. Naruto quickly strafed to the left, keeping his eyes partially focused on his grandfather while heading toward the tree line near his starting point in the spar. He knew that the quickest route to death would be attacking his grandfather head-on. As he passed by a particularly large tree, completely obscuring his grandfather's vision of Naruto, he instantly formed 3 shadow clones seamlessly, all with the mental command to scatter and keep their opponent busy. He knew his grandfather would never lose to a shadow clone, but it would divert at least some of the man's attention while they were active. Instinct alone caused him to twist his body as a kunai passed through the air where his torso had just been. Naruto mentally cursed himself for not being aware that his grandfather had been close enough to attack. Naruto quickly placed a single-layered genjutsu to affect other people's sense of smell, sight and hearing as he continued to move on an unpredictable path. The genjutsu would not do much against his grandfather, but it would give Naruto a brief window of freedom to open his own senses while moving to find the location of his opponent. Naruto felt the heat of a fire technique coming from behind and he replaced himself with a falling leaf through use of a sealess body replacement technique. He hated that he had been forced to the trees so quickly. It was more difficult to attack his grandfather from this position, but it would make defending easier. Receiving mental information from one of his shadow clones that had engaged his grandfather, he rushed as quickly and quietly as he could toward where the man was currently. From his position in the trees, he could see his grandfather focusing attention on the shadow clone currently using wind release, Beastwave Palm to send long blades of wind at the man while the other clone attacked his grandfather with genjutsu. Naruto knew neither would be successful, but it would give him time to attack their opponent. Naruto summoned 2 more shadow clones to assist the other 2 on the ground while he began preparing his own attack. Naruto silently unsheathed the tanto he had stashed in a spine sheath while strafing to the left to move out of his grandfather's line of sight while the man was still dealing with 4 shadow clones. The straight-bladed tanto was flat black, reflecting no light, and had the ability to allow wind-natured chakra to flow into the blade, causing it to be sharper and stronger. Naruto dropped from the trees and landed in a crouch on the ground, never causing any sound. The next technique he was going to use was designed to allow the user to pull their target underground by their ankles. But Naruto knew that that was only possible if the user's ability to manipulate earth-natured chakra was better than the target. Naruto was aware that his grandfather was far better than him, so he would simply have to tweak how he attacked with it. After forming a few single-handed seals for the earth release, double suicide decapitation technique, he disappeared into the ground and quickly moved to where his grandfather had been standing. Naruto sent a small amount of chakra to the soles of his feet to give him a solid base. He strongly leapt from underground while winging his tanto at the lower spine of his grandfather. Shock struck his body as he watched the blade cut into his grandfather's back, paralyzing the man permanently. He couldn't believe what he had just done to his grandfather. He hadn't expected the attack to succeed. While he was staring at the fallen image of his grandfather, a blood-covered blade loosely held in his grip, he felt pain and a sharp crack in his lower jaw. As he was sent flying away, blade fallen to the ground, he realized his grandfather had used a genjutsu against him. The shock of what he had seen overrode his sense of logic, and he hadn't realized it until it was too late. Naruto readjusted his body in air, attempting to form some sort of defense as his mind and senses were dazed from the now broken jaw that his grandfather had given him. He realized it was too late when a strong knee forced all air out of his lungs and his airborne path was sent vertical. There was no warning that his grandfather had moved above him in the air aside from the snapping of a few vertebrae in his back. Naruto smashed harshly into the ground. He coughed out blood as tears of pain leaked from his eyes, but he ignored it as best he could. His grandfather was ruthless in serious spars. A minor broken back wouldn't halt the fight. Naruto rolled to the right just into time to see his grandfather slam the man's knee in the spot where he had just laid. He mentally thanked the Kyuubi as he felt his back heal itself, and he kick-flipped onto his feet just as his grandfather slammed an elbow onto the dirt of where his body just rested. He didn't bother engaging in hand-to-hand combat. His taijutsu wasn't even close to his grandfather's at this point. Naruto knew, because of how close they were to each other, that his grandfather was about to release another fire technique. So he summoned his wind-natured chakra as quickly as he could and used wind release, rotation shuriken to summon 5 spinning blades of wind and send them all toward his grandfather. The time his attack bot gave him enough of a window to create 4 more shadow clones to replace the 4 that his grandfather had already destroyed. Naruto mentally commanded them to work in teams of 2, one using offensive ninjutsu while the other used supportive genjutsu. The real Naruto leapt back just in time to dodge the fire technique his grandfather had used. Knowing his best opportunity to win was to attack with the 4 shadow clones as assistants, he quickly darted past the smoldering ground and toward his grandfather while pulling out a few shuriken and throwing them at the man. Naruto formed the appropriate seals and 6 shuriken turned into 60, all aimed at his grandfather. The attack alone wouldn't be enough to work against the man. But his grandfather was still dealing with the 2 shadow clones, keeping the man busy with genjutsu to disrupt the man's senses and 2 more clones attacking from range with ninjutsu. Naruto watched his grandfather replace himself with one of the ninjutsu clones, which was immediately destroyed by the hail of shuriken, and then the man quickly dispatched the genjutsu using clone that had been assisting that particular shadow clone. Naruto cursed as his grandfather teleported behind the last ninjutsu using clone and eliminated it. He didn't bother sticking around to see his final clone be destroyed as he quickly disappeared back into the trees. He summoned 36 shadow clones, all with the command to scatter and attack their opponent. Naruto hated to use numbers over skill, but he was far too outclassed at the moment. His opponent was faster, stronger, more experienced and far more skilled. He knew it wouldn't make much difference, but he refused to simply give up. Naruto audibly gasped as he felt over 10 of his clones destroyed at once. This was another reason he hated using clones. The mental feedback link was a hindrance whenever many of them were destroyed at the same time. His gasp was all the noise needed to give his position away. His grandfather capitalized on it immediately and Naruto was forced to dodge kunai. As he leapt through the trees, he tried to move higher and higher to get a better defensive position. It was all for naught, as his grandfather had predicted his landing and used an explosive seal-tagged kunai to destroy the branch he had intended to land on. As Naruto was falling to the ground, he felt the burning sensation of fire as his skin was severely burned from a fire technique. He mentally thanked the ground as he smashed into it, rendering him unconscious. Naruto blinked himself back to the present as his sharp Sharingan eyes continued to scan the surrounding canopy for the reason he was currently leaping from tree to tree, hundreds of feet above the ground in the middle of a Southeast Asian forest. His grandfather had been severely disappointed with him during the spar. It wasn't because he hadn't landed a single clean blow during the spar, no. The man understood the gap in skill was too wide. The disappointment came from his reaction to wounding his grandfather, or rather, a genjutsu of the man. Naruto had been berated more harshly than ever before about freezing up in the middle of a battle. His grandfather had told him that he needed a cold and detached psyche when fighting or in combat. He wasn't sure how he would react the next time he was forced to draw blood against another person, but he would try his best to not allow himself to be affected as much. A flash of light blue, the visible appearance of Magic, out of the corner of his eye caused Naruto to stop suddenly. A demiguise. They were ape-like docile creatures with long silver hair that could be used to create invisibility cloaks. The cloaks were extremely rare, and the only one sold in Borgen and Berks was priced far above what his grandfather was willing to pay for something the man could create himself. Demiguises were very scarce creatures that lived in the canopies of Asian forests. They had the ability to turn themselves invisible. The Sharingan's ability to literally see magic is what allowed Naruto and his grandfather to hunt and find them. The group had already found and killed 2 of them. This would make the third and final one needed to make 3 cloaks of invisibility. As Naruto began heading toward the demiguise, he breathed a sigh of relief. The most trying part of hunting these creatures wasn't the hot and humid weather, nor was it the long days spent searching for each one. No, it was the outfits Anko wore because of the heat. This trip hadn't been the first time he had seen Anko with only a swimsuit covering her chest. But somehow this time was different. His body reacted more to the sight of her naked flesh. At times he found it hard to focus on anything other than the beads of sweat that would run down the woman's neck, over the swell of her breast and into the cloth of her small top. Times like those would cause his heart to race, his blood to pump and his body to heat up. His breathing would become slightly erratic and his clothing would feel more constricting than it had just moments before. Naruto intellectually knew what was happening. He was hitting puberty and his body was becoming aroused, but that knowledge didn't make him any more comfortable. No, if anything, he was more uneasy. He did everything he could to hide the way her body affected him, at least until he had time to come to terms with it. Right now it was too new to him, too foreign. He would need time to adjust to these new sensations, and if he knew anything about Anko, it was that she wouldn't be willing to give him that time. She would tease, seduce and jump him as soon as she knew he was beginning to respond to her. Naruto shook away those thoughts as he easily killed the demiguise that he had found. They were so peaceful that they would simply stand there and allow you to leap over to them. Maybe they're so used to being unseen, Naruto thought as he began tying the creature's dead body with wire, that they haven't experienced fear. Meh, whatever the reason, at least the only tough part with them is finding them. That's it for today. I will stop here. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you please consider subscribe and make sure to hit that like button, share with your friends, and don't forget to check out author of this story. Details in description.